Good morning, everybody. I am very happy to introduce myself as Dr. E. Ravikumar, Assistant Professor in the Department of Saiva Siddhanta Philosophy, Madurai Kamaraj University. Honorable Vice-Chancellor of Madurai Kamaraj University, Madurai. Respected Registrar of Madurai Kamaraj University, Professor V. Alagiri Swami, Chairperson, School of Religions, Philosophy and Humanist Thought. Distinguished research persons, Professor S. Lourdunathan, Guest Faculty, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, former Head of the Department of Philosophy, Lourdunathan College, Karmathur, Madurai. Professor S. Pannirselvam, former Professor and Head of the Department of Philosophy, University of Madras, Chennai. Professor G. Misra, former Professor and Head of the Department of Philosophy, University of Madras, Chennai. Professor Srikala Aiyar, Professor and Head of the Department of Philosophy, Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit, Koladi. Professor D. Ramakrishnan, Chairperson and Head, Department of Political Science, Madurai Kamaraj University, Madurai. Staff members and research scholars of our school, and my dear participants, I welcome you all and I salute everybody on this wonderful occasion of World Philosophy Day celebration, sponsored by Indian Council of Philosophical Research, that is ICPR, New Delhi. I feel honor bound to thank the ICPR for providing financial aid to conduct this lecture program. On my behalf and on behalf of the Department of Saiva Siddhanta Philosophy, I am very glad to thank the eminent speakers. The theme of World Philosophy Day 2020 is the importance of philosophy in times of crisis. The 2020 edition of World Philosophy Day will focus on the importance of philosophical thinking in helping us cope with the multiple challenges the world faces. In 2005, the UNESCO General Conference proclaimed that World Philosophy Day would be celebrated every third Thursday of November. The day encourages academic exchange and highlights knowledge in addressing global issues. It is a day for people to share thoughts openly, explore and discuss the new ideas and inspire public debate or discussion on society challenges which we are celebrating. Once again, I welcome you all for this wonderful occasion. Now, I invite the Vice Chancellor to deliver the presidential address. Thank you, sir.
Good morning to everybody. My dear and respected Dr. Ravikumar, my dear and respected Vasanta, Registrar in charge of this great university, Professor Dr. Alagar Swami, Head of the Department of Department of Saiva Siddhanta Philosophy, and I am so happy to see Professor Dr. Lourdunathan from JNU, and so many experts are, I could see that, even people from various parts of the country. Good morning to one and all. It's a great time. Actually, it's very much needed a conference in this title. Why? Because, 3 days back, we had a conference at Coimbatore about the philosophy of Vallalar, Ramalingal Adigarar, Vallalar philosophy, where we all discussed about it, why we have to have such a philosophical conference, why there is a need for when we are discussing. Now, the country is on pressure, I can say. Even I told that when I was a student at the 4th standard or 5th standard, where in the schools we have the moral classroom. In the moral classroom, they taught about that the things where we have to follow in the life other than the studies. That will make a human, as a human, we discussed about it. Like that, when we are seeing today, even a LKG student is seeing the pressure on their regular studies. I don't know how it's going to happen, how it's happened to the country like India. So now, this is the time we have to talk about the religion, philosophy, and humanist thought. When I am going through some of the paper, when we are talking about that religion or philosophy, immediately they are talking about the what I can say. They put it in the some of the religions is very response for that, or some of the God is coming over there, or they isolated such a conference, such a political paint they are giving there. But no need. Even my friend from Suraj is there, madam. We had a conference at Coimbatore. We had a very nice discussion on that one. So what we are looking for, we have to have a good human. That is a very, very important thing. Whatever the education you can have, whatever the degree you can have, whatever the post you are sitting, but first I want to see a real human. That is a very, very important thing. Even I had a photograph on the other side. The Einstein clearly told that a success of the man, it's not very important. But the human nature of the man, it's very important for the life. So what I want to say that as a message to my participant, be a human nature. Be a kind person in the society. Kindly help each other in the society. Then live happily. That is the message I want to give. Why? Because when we are talking about the Vallalar, because we had a discussion about the Vallalar, when you are seeing that, Vadiya Pairi Kandavudan Vadine, why they are telling that? They are not only giving the philosophy, they are giving the life, what you are having in the universe. They combined, even Vallalar, so many places they are talking about their agriculture and agriculture related work. You see that even Professor Tyagarajan on the day he talked about it. First we have to give the attention to the water. When you have the proper water, you can have your agriculture. If you have your agriculture, you have a good production. If you have a good production, you will avoid the poverty. If you are avoiding the poverty, then the people will live very happily. That is everywhere. When you are talking about philosopher, you are talking about religion. Everybody we are talking about that, what you call related to a happy life. One thing I want to do that, even 2 months back, we released a book, namely Kadavulai Thedu. Search for the God. We released the book. It's written by a Muslim IPS officer. Then I asked that, sir, why you are very much interested in this book? How you wrote the book? Kadavulai Thedu. Search for the God. He told that nowadays, everywhere corruption, everywhere there is a pressure, everywhere people are fighting, there is a chaos in the environment. Then he explained that when the people are living very happily, with the kindness, with the philosophical thought, if a straightforwardness, without corruption, a man is living, then I can see that I want to see such a person in the universe. Then I can call them, or call the particular person is a God. So no need to go here and there. Whether you are going to argue that whether God is there or not, I'm not coming to the point. But we are going to come to the point. Some superpower is there, but who is going to hold that superpower? That is a very, very important thing. So I think that this conference, this actually discussion, because Madam Aiyar from Central University of Rajasthan, Professor Lourdunathan from JNU, and so many people are from different parts of that country, kindly bring out a good discussion to my students. They have to come out from the pressure today, what they are having. Even I told them, what we thought that humans are the superior power of the universe. We are the superior power of the universe. But today, a small virus is teaching to us, right? What is a life? If you are not going to take care of your environment, what our philosophical things are saying, if you are not going to see that, or you are not going to respect that human being, you are not respecting to your village, if you are not going to, respect your, people living around you, then the country will have that such a bad thing. So now we have to live even whatever the position, again I am telling that, whatever the education you are having, whatever the position you are having, whatever the richness you are having, come out from that. Try to live philosophically. Try to live happily. Try to help other people. With this, you can live a happy life. The world, the country will be very peaceful and lead the happy life. So with this, hope that this wonderful conference to bring out lot of things to my young students and participants, and the conference will help, make a platform to the youngsters to keep our country in a high position. Thank you very much for giving the wonderful opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. Now I invite felicitation address, Rajasthan, Madam Aiyar.
Hello, Namaste. My dear Honorable Vice-Chancellor, beloved Vice-Chancellor, I should say, when the leader is good, only the institution will flourish. So whatever I saw Krishnan for through 3 years, after becoming VC also, no change in his behavior. It itself indicates that he is a humanist first. The philosophy comes from humanity only. Dear respected dignitaries on the dais, my friend Dr. Ravikumar, Panir Selvam-ji, I am seeing you from a long back. I expected you for Coimbatore seminar, but you couldn't turn up. Sarvan Kumar-ji, Ramakrishnan-ji, and all Unni and Sri Kala, all are my friends, only my philosophical friends. By God's grace, there is a bridge between this Hindi department and philosophy from ICPR. I must be thankful to you. Now, as Professor Krishnan-ji discussed, philosophy is nothing but the approach to God in different methods. As we saw, all the religions may be different. The thoughts are one. In Hindi, we say that manzil ek hai, rasta alag alag. வர வழி எதா இருந்தாலும் சேர்ற ஒரு இடம் ஒண்ணுதான். That's what he said. That only leads to Tattvamasi, what we speak in philosophy. When we talk about children, very easy. The non-dualism today, we are all discussing about that Vallalar, Advaitavada. Jo Dvait nahi, which is not dualism, that is Advaita, non-dualism. As Adi Shankaracharya describes that it is the petal of the flower, rose. When we remove the petal, the stick will not be called as rose. When we remove the stick, the petals will be falling down. That is, without God, no human being. Without human being, there is no God. Where we have to see the God, wherever we go, everyone. I would like to dedicate on Kabir's story today before I could say felicitation to all. Once God appeared in the dream of a sadhu, he said that tomorrow I'll be coming to your home for a visit. Then the sadhu discussed this with the VIPs of all the villages. He made a grand party ready. Waited, none has come. One poor cow came, and the sadhu and the rich man hit that and went away because it is destroying others. The night went on. Then the God came. I came with much love and affection. You hit me. Then the sadhu asked, you didn't even come. Then he said, I came in the shape of a cow. You people hit me. God is there. God is everywhere. That's what the story says. And I would like to say very warm welcome and thanks, Professor Krishnan, because I should not say this, but I'm telling, he is your well-wisher. When we talked a lot, 10 minutes the duration, he was talking a lot about Madurai Kamaraj University development, and he says the credit is not to me, to entire my team. This itself indicates the philosophical thought of a humanist. We need to become the philosophy expert. Just let us become the humanitarian humanist. With these few words, I give my special thanks and heart full of gratitude to the entire University of Madurai Kamaraj University, and I will be witnessing that with much pleasure today. Wish you all happy Philosopher's Day.
Happy Holi, madam.
Happy Holi to us, sir, to all. If you
Thank you.
celebrate with it, because today is Holi for us.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, madam. Now I invite Professor Lourdunathan to deliver the keynote address.
Sir, you can on your mic, sir.
Mute, unmute.
Unmute your mic, sir.
Yeah. Am I audible now?
And now it's okay, sir. Now it's okay.
Thank you. Very good morning, and my greetings to my own university where I served for last 35 years, Madurai Kamaraj University, and Professor Ravi, Professor identified my marking is a silent, a very good.
But you are looking like a student, sir.
No, you are dying. You are dying.
That's right. Thank you, sir. Please, sir.
When you die, you become alive.
Yeah, chemical technology.
Yeah, I'm very happy to see Professor Pannisalvam, my own mentor, and my good friend Mishraji, and I'm sure I will be meeting also Srikala. I have my own observation of them. My own mentor, Professor Pannisalvam, lives in philosophy. Rather than he teaches philosophy, he has been all along. After his service in Chennai University, Madras University, he continues to breathe the philosophy. He reminds me as one of the best inspiration in living philosophy along with him. And I know my Mishra, who is highly qualified and especially qualified to communicate philosophy both technically as well professionally as well as to mass. He is a kind of person who philosophizes life and life philosophizes through my good friend. Srikala, I know for several years, who has been consistent in one area of philosophy, the theory of truth or theory of knowledge in philosophy for many years. Probably inspired again by my own mentor, Professor Pannisalvam. So it's very nice. So happy to see you. I thank every one of you, the School of the Department of Religion, Philosophy and Humanist Thought, and Vice-Chancellor of Madurai Kamaraj University. I know after you have taken up, there is a lot of changes. I would like to come back to Madurai probably after a couple of months and be there in Madurai. Well, the theme that I have taken is more of an original theme for reflection today, and especially in the presence of my own Professor Pannisalvam. I do not want to spell out some of the serious quotations, but to start with the statement of the inaugural address of our renowned Vice-Chancellor, we need to live philosophically. That's a wonderful couplet that I picked up from his immediate conversation that he made. Now, my question is how analytic philosophy can be related to live philosophically? How the whole tradition called analytic philosophy can be related to live philosophically. Because usually, by the theme, put it in other words, I have titled my theme for sharing today, Cultural Implications of Analytic Philosophy. How, in what sense, I can hold that analytic philosophy as a cultural tie-up, as a cultural implication, as a cultural influence. To what extent analytic philosophy has to say something to me culturally, or what analytic philosophy addresses to me culturally when we discuss the entire tradition called analytic philosophy. So in that sense, I would ask the forgiveness of the philosophical community. I'll be remaining non-philosophical rather than technically philosophical. Why I say I will be remaining non-philosophical rather than technically philosophical is the fact that I will try to make a kind of a child effort to relate analytic philosophy with culture. And you know for certain, analytic philosophy is away from culture. I'm sure Professor Pannisalam will agree with me. The discussion that has taken place in the early and the later part of 20th century, which you call analytic philosophy. And there is another major discussion that has been taking place right now extended, which you call the post-structural school, or what we call continental philosophy. Philosophy that emerges not in the sense of Europe or India or Asia. I have my own reservation to say philosophy in the geopolitical term of it. That's a philosophy by its nature transcends any nationality, transcends any territory. It cuts across any cultural innovation. Only then it can be philosophical. So simple argument or reflection that I place for you, something cannot be European if it is philosophical. Because by nature, philosophy is a reflection about life and reflection about human life. Therefore, to categorize, to territorize philosophy as continental or Indian or Asian or what do you call it, the Filipino or German, perhaps it is good in the preliminary level of placing them in some land related area. So let me come to the point. My question that I am asking all of us today, what could be the cultural implication of this entire excellent tradition which we call analytic philosophy? I remember my own teacher back in Madras Christian College, probably 1983-84, when Professor Pandisalam started symbolic logic over there. We had a professor by name H.R.T. Roberts. I know Panir would warmly remember H.R.T. Roberts, who introduced me this realm called, this temple called analytic philosophy. So from then onwards, I took a lot of reading into this area of analytic philosophy. And I found the relevance of analytic philosophy, the discussion that analytic philosophy has its own implication. Normally, the antidote is analytic philosophy is purely technical. The antidote is analytic philosophy is highly professional. In no way it could be related to the life of a person or to the life of a culture as a whole. But whenever analytic tradition has been discussed, my mind always, back of mind, is that how do I take some of those concepts in a relevant manner? How can I apply those concepts in much more life-oriented manner? So that makes me to title the discussion, discussing with Professor Ravikumar, what could be the cultural implications of analytic philosophy? So that is a question I am placing before you. Not, let me do some kind of uneducated analysis rather than putting a technical analysis of what we mean by analytic philosophy. To me, the first idea which I would like to share, maybe I'm sure the great scholars would be able to respond, give me some kind of reflection over it, so that we learn to unlearn things. Now, first one which I see is analytic philosophy is always a kind of consciousness. It's a consciousness operates on two levels. When analytic philosophy is conscious, when philosophy can't become conscious of itself, what we get, probably I name it as analytic philosophy. A philosophy that analyzes itself. Normally, we take for granted philosophy speaks about God, philosophy addresses about the world, philosophy speaks about human existence, philosophy talks about some kind of ethics, morality, do's and don'ts. But much more seriously, if you put a reflective question, I understand when philosophy addresses itself, what I get it, analytic philosophy. It's an analysis of its own language. It's analysis of its own truth claims. In that sense, a self-reflective trend of its language, of its component, of philosophical ground is what I call it analytic philosophy, probably the 20th century Cambridge School of Thought. So when philosophy introspects its language, its reflection, its clarity of its own language, what we call analysis of philosophy. We often take for granted philosophy analyzes, explores the human world culture, man, relation, society. It does not happen. It is not only true, there is other thing. Philosophy analyzes, explains, explores itself. That pilgrimage, which I call it analytic philosophy, or the pilgrimage of analytical tradition in philosophy. When philosophy tries to clarify whether the language that it uses is okay or not okay, whether the language that philosophers employed in the history of either Western, in the history of philosophy in general, is clear enough, the question then, the answer is analytic philosophy. One bewitchment, if I want to use the Wittgensteinian terminology, the bewitchment in philosophy, the wonder in philosophy is this: the more questions that are not answerable, then you are in the realm of philosophy. The questions that you are answerable, you are in the realm of natural science. So natural science is an answer to certain basic philosophical question, but philosophy thrives itself, breathes itself into us as the wind, as the air that blows into our life. Philosophy remains alive by asking questions that are not verifiable. The more number of verifiability of philosophical question, better sustainability of philosophy itself. So my first position, or for a key that I would like to provide for the discussion, is that when philosophy analyzes itself, which I would call it analytic philosophy, when philosophy analyzes the society, explore human relation in terms of the environment, explore human relation to culture, explore human relation to our ways of life, then it is an other consciousness. So there are two types of consciousness that operates in philosophy. It's self-conscious of itself, its own reflection. It is other conscious of the world it reflects upon. Probably the other conscious, we call it schools of thought, right? Systems of thought. I know the professor who facilitated made nicely a reference to non-dualistic school from Indian tradition, which has been an epitome of Indian philosophical thinking, whatever it may be. So there are two types of consciousness that seems to be operating, that as philosophy has been engaged with. One is it addresses itself. By addressing itself, it addresses the world. When it addresses the world, the reality outside itself, it is called continental philosophy or systems of thought. You call it idealism, you call it empiricism, you call it rationalism, you call it perspectivism in general. One can call it perspectivism in general. Saivism is a kind of perspectivism of me in relation, the self in relation to the world, and together in relation to any other entity. So there are two kind of consciousness of perspectivism. One kind of consciousness that when philosophy addresses itself without any territory, without any nationality, without any what you call identification, when it scrutinizes its own clarity of its proposition, its language, its own rules, its functionality, we may name it as analysis of philosophy. I think every one of us, as students of philosophy or professors of philosophy, we have been doing this exercise consciously or unconsciously. When we teach or when we engage a particular school of thought, we simultaneously do engage a kind of self-analysis. To what extent I agree with, I content with that school of thought. It is not repeating of a kind of system of thought. Much more, I think, in a subconscious or a conscious level, we do simultaneously engage to what extent that school of thought affects me in my own personal. So the address of philosophy, the two address of philosophy, there are two addresses. One address is it addresses itself. Another address, it addresses the world at large. When Heidegger talks about the being in relation to the world, it is an address of the existence per capita. I'm using a wrong word. In an address, an existence in a totalized level. At the same time, it is also a self-address. What is the sense of being that I have been wrongly conceiving of in and through the metaphysical orientation? So first idea for my reflection today is how philosophy addresses itself. When addressing itself, one important tradition which we can pick up, and especially the analytic tradition of the what do you call the Cambridge as well as the United States tradition in the first and the later part of 20th century, it addresses itself in two important ways. One is by analyzing its own language. One of the dream of analytic philosophers, all of us would agree, is to clear the muddles in language which philosophy has been all along. For example, we use the word being in multiple manners. In every manner, it is sensible. Therefore, the address, the self-clarifying function of philosophy somewhere starts with Frege. I know you would agree with Frege makes a very strong distinction about sense and reference. When Frege is discussed about sense and reference by referring to morning star and evening star, over there in my classroom in Panneerselvam, I'll be writing a different notes. What does it mean by sensibility and referentiality? What is the sense Frege refers to me in my own life? And what is the reference that he makes? I know Frege makes a reference that a word or an expression can be multiply be sensible. A morning star identified with an evening star has a reference of a singular object of reference which you call a star. But the sensibilities are different. Now, this idea picking up, what does it tells me culturally? What does it informs me, addresses me culturally? That language as culture as can be used in multiple sensibilities. So the second important idea, probably I am overwriting on Frege to imply what Frege tells me when he analyzes the philosophical language there is a different possibility of employing sense and reflability. A reference can be singular, but sensibility can be multiple. That's an idea. Sensible can be multiple, right? You can refer to an object as a tree, but the tree word sensibility can refer to many things. It can refer to like what we call the evening star and the morning star, the classical example. Or in our own example, the moon. We say that it's a waking moon or a sleeping moon. We say the waning moon and the waxing moon. But it refers to the same, denotes one particular object. But the question is, does language be restrained to, constrained by, imprisoned to an object of reference alone? That is what I mean by implication. When we use language, should language, from the point of view of what we call the propositional analytical tradition, from the point of view of analytic philosophers of the formal linguistic tradition, take Russell, Eli Wittgenstein, Frege, A.J. Aiyar, all this set of thinkers, they make a very serious idea that every proposition that we use must be clear, distinct, and it should have a proper description. It should have a proper designated description. In other words, put it in a popular language, every proposition that we utter must be related to a reality out there. In a very popular language, the proposition must be atomic, singular. It should speak a singular truth, and that truth is revealed in relation to, with reference to an object in the world. In other words, analytic philosophy starts with clarifying language with the hope that by clarifying language, many problems of philosophy can be what we call settled, if not solved. I don't think once it is solved, I think many philosophy professors will not have a job. So long these questions are perennial, philosophy, the life of philosophers are guaranteed, as a side note. Now, once you clarify it, they believe that many of these metaphysical problems could be settled and we can move further in philosophy. This moving further, which I take it as another implication. So when I read Frege, I understand one important implication. Language, he points about its referentiality. That P can have multiple sensibility, but the statement P can refer to only one object. From this, I imply my language, that the language that we humans speak is so rich. Put it in other words, it is analytic philosophical tradition comes into kind of a conversational relation with language. In earlier tradition, language is taken for granted. Whatever I have perspective about the world, whether it is an idealistic perspective or a perspective about human life and its ultimate end, morality, etc., we have taken language for granted. But it is this tradition which did not take language for granted. It appreciates the richness of language, the culturality of language. Put it in a different language, in a different sense. It is analytic philosophy which begins to appreciate language. By appreciating language, it tries scientifically explore language in its advantages as well as in its boundaries. The boundaries of language and going beyond language probably is the first key that opened up by analytical tradition. Probably I am making it too much of a claim, but that is how I feel comfortable with analytic tradition whenever I come into a dialogue or read the contribution of analytic philosophers. That language is the indwelling home. Language is the temple. Language is our home in and through which we live our life. Put it differently, it is not I or you speak a language about the world outside. Rather, language speaks the world me. Language speaks me. Language puts me across into the world as a human person. When I say I am human, I am using a language, and that it is in and through the language, this sense of being human is placed across. In other words, it is the language that informs the world. It is not that I speak a language, I mediate through a language. It is the language, a culture in which you and me, the broadly existent, becomes alive. Therefore, another important derivation that one could make it the significance of language and the necessity of analyzing, clarifying language, and the insistence of appreciating the richness of language as a mode of human existence. It is in and through language I exist. Probably for Descartes, he thinks therefore exists, but for analytic tradition, we live in language and therefore we exist. It is the culture. Now, put it related another way, analytic tradition has got another important relation, that language is cultural, and by being cultural, I am linguistic. I put it this way, X is cultural insofar as he speaks a language. In other words, a human is linguistic and cultural at the same time, in the same manner, in the same speed. Diversing of culture from language, or diversing of language from culture is not a possible being human. It's not possible of communicating my own self in the world and the world in me. Therefore, the significance of language as cultural, the significance of language as metaphysical, the significance of language as moral, the significance of language as epistemological, as the significance of language as exploratory, probably the key has been opened up thanks to the analytic tradition, which opened up this understanding of the richness of language. Let me just enter into another important thinker whom we always come into contact with, Russell. Whenever we discuss Bertrand Russell, and Bertrand Russell, I am sure you would agree with me, a very rigorous philosopher who cannot be reconciled with any other thought pattern until and otherwise it is verified, it is proved, it is clearly communicated, it is rationally proved. It is not prospectively I can have a dialogue with Russell unless and until I can have a dialogue with Russell propositionally. In other words, I should speak statements which are truth functional. Only then a sense of meaning is taken very seriously by Russell. Now, I am referring to his theory of atomism, and I am referring to his theory of a distinction between the theory of description that he makes it. So Russell makes a point from which I make an implication that our language, by cutting across all its muddles, confusion possibilities, escapabilities, vulnerabilities, muddles that one has to communicate a language which speaks the word in direct proposition. Put it other way, P is true insofar as it is directly, propositionally, invariably related to the world it informs. That is probably that is an insight I gained from Russell. Whenever a Russell is taught over there in my Western philosophy class, or Russell has been discussed during my class with my students, that Russell communicates that our linguistic capability, in spite of its multiple possibility of sensibility, one thing as a truth condition is that it should be propositionally clear. That is why the entire contribution of Frege, Russell, early Wittgenstein evolves into the entire computation language. If people have not attempted such an enormous, intelligible task in philosophy of discussing the nature of language to be propositionally right. Propositionally right means to be truth functionally right, to be truth functionally valid or invalid. Probably we would not be developed that computational theory of truth functionality. So in other words, the contribution of analytic philosophy, again, one has to embrace. Probably technically speaking, analytic philosophy is not the friend of many. Technically speaking, many of us would be away from analytic philosophy because it is too technical. I think one can also do some kind of familiarizing analytic philosophy, coming to analytic philosophy totally from a next door. What are their relevance? What are their implications? Russell makes a wonderful implication, the entire Russellian distinction of what he call the theory of atomism, theory of description, and his own epistemological concern. His own epistemological position is that truth is propositional bound and it is formally true, which develops to kind of a logical symbolism, and logical symbolism gives us a language of computer communication. In other words, the digital communication has its heritage to philosophers. Philosophers need not be having a negative opinion. They are outdated. They are irrelevant. In much more seriously, one becomes philosophical. Their relevance is communicated to the human culture abroad. Today, the late part of 20th or beginning of 21st century is determined by that digital world. The way I communicate through 0 and 1 language in our digital media, or in your mobile media, or in your any internet communication. This communication had a linguistic expression, language, logical expression to the entire development discussion, starting from moving away from the Aristotelian syllabi, moving away from the Aristotelian syllogistic imprisonment. By denying it, you move towards, you transcend, you grow towards a kind of a different type of symbolism. Today, that is a symbolism that consciously or unconsciously determines every decision in the world. So in that sense, the contribution of analytic philosophers, though technical, though it is a kind of a language spoken in within the limited philosophy class, which we call analytic tradition, it has a much more wider spectrum of human life. It has affected human life. It not only it has influenced human communication in a much more broader spectrum of. Now, moving away from Russell, let me get back to Wittgenstein as another important discussant within analytic tradition. Whenever you talk about analytic tradition, I know Professor Panneerselvam always told me there are 2 dimensions of analytical of Wittgenstein, the early and the later. The early dimension of Wittgenstein tells me in my class that world must be represented correctly is something that I learned very seriously. The world must be represented correctly. You stand in front of the mirror and the mirror must be good. The language is kind of a mirror. It should represent your world, and that the content of the mirror must be good. It should not either boost you like you are best in the world, or it should not minimize you are worst in the world. It should reflect you correctly. Put it differently, the language is the picturing, mirroring. Rotary takes his mirror. He employs the same metaphor. later, when you talk, Rotary comes again from analytic tradition. So this kind of mirroring, that we should speak a language, or the language in which you and me indwell should mirror the world, mirror me correctly. Most of us, for example, many of us would like to mirror us in too many languages. Of course, that languages will be sophistry. You know, sophistry? A sophistry that is not history about myself or yourself. That's what we call it, sophistry. If it does not historically correctly picture, mirror me, then that language is false. Now, I make a distinction which analytic tradition makes, what is called scientific picturing, what is called pseudo-scientific picturing, right? We make a distinction between what is called science and pseudoscience. I imply it culturally. If and when language is placed or picture as a mirror that mirrors me correctly, that images me correctly, I cannot have a false image, as if I am the only man in the whole world going to save the world, or only this kind of particular school of thought is going to be what we call redeem the whole world, or only this school of ethics is the correct ethics. And I think it gives a wonderful caution of how to be human correctly and how to live my life with a language that I speak and you speak and we speak, and that language must mirror me without any powder, without any faciality. But you know, faciality is very important. If you want to win the election, you have to have a number of electoral facialities. It should be a washing machine, or it should be 1,500 rupees promised for all the ladies. Right? These are all pictorialities which doesn't picture the world correctly. So when Wittgenstein is taught, I read Wittgenstein from a different point of view. To what extent this picture theory of meaning would picture me correctly? The address is that picturing of myself in the world, or the world that is pictures to me, must mirror me in an exact proportional manner. So in other words, I am not going to the technical side of it. I'm just trying to play with Wittgenstein. I'm just trying to interact, dialogue, friendly dialogue with Russell. I'm just trying to establish a contact with Frege and trying to say whether some of these thoughts, bracketing all their technicalities, to what extent it affects me, to what extent it addresses me. Moving to the later, there are three important contents that I find very, 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 very important. One content, again, I remember my Panisalam classes, the idea of language as game. We play a lot of game, right? Sometimes we play the game of a professor. Sometimes we play the game of a father. Sometimes we play the game of the savior of the entire family. Sometimes we play the game, we are the only truth speakers in the world. Sometimes we also pretend that we are the only masters in the world. Probably our profile does not speak like that. So we play game. And language is a game that human play. That's a very interesting idea, which going beyond language has affected psychology, has affected cultural reading. Going beyond the territory of linguistic analysis, it has moved into the world that how this language game is played. In other words, meaning is the basic component that linguistic philosophers or analytic philosopher seems to be very strongly harping upon. What does mean to say that I mean something? Put it differently, what is the meaning of meaning? Now, this is a technical question. Normally, we don't ask. We will simply ask, what is the meaning of this and that? What is the meaning of Brahman? What is the meaning of Atman? What is the meaning of TV? What is the meaning of that company? I think philosophers are asking another popular but very interesting technical question. How do I mean when I mean that such and such is the case? This is a bit technical. I don't want to play that game of technicality. Let me come to the normal life. This problem of meaning clarifies the very meaning that we try to attach to life. You know, most of the time we are in a way culturally conditioned that this X meaning is correct, Y meaning is incorrect. I think this conditionality of harping on, habituating oneself, this political meaning is the only meaning by which I communicate the world, or this economic meaning is the only meaning that I relate to the world, perhaps is not the correct meaning when we say analysis, the meaning of very meaning, because by using the insight that language is a game and it is meaningful in its multiple applications, the tool example, that we play linguistic game differently in different contexts. That context decides meaning. Contextuality makes the textual becomes alive. The text is not alive because it is a text of some tradition. The text is not meaningful within the tradition, within the boundaries of the tradition. The text is meaningful in and only in relation to the context in which you play the text. This is something very, 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 I say, empathetically important. Whenever I embrace or you embrace, you give a kiss or a hug to Wittgenstein. Thanks to Wittgenstein for that insight. The text is textual, not because it is a shabda, not only because it is Shabda, not only it is pictures the world in only such and such manner, it pictures the world in multiple possibilities. This rich multiple possibilities is the way I would like to love this very person called Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein remains very technical. Insofar as he was technical, he was a good friend of Russell and G.U. Moore. Once he moves the so-called technicality in the sense when philosophy addresses itself analytically, Wittgenstein is embraced by Russell. But later Wittgenstein comes out with a different insight, an insight which I take it very useful to our everyday life, or one can take it as comfortable, characteristically rich to employ. Meaning is sensibilities are multiple. One has to open their eyes towards this multiple possibility. We talk about monoculture, we talk about monolithic culture, we talk about homogenization of economic culture, we talk about the continent philosophy makes a lot of criticism about the technocratic worldview, either it is the digital worldview or either the technical worldview, or it is environmental, losing its own being, ecological, life-oriented. All these critics put it across. I think there is a seed. Wittgenstein, he says that language is rich, it has its own multiple. Another important self is the multiplicity of cultural plurality is that kind of implication. I think Mr. Wittgenstein or our friend Wittgenstein opens up, thanks to Wittgenstein for opening up that insight when he talks about the language is meaningful in its particular use. In other words, every context, every culturality is a textuality and it has no either inferior or superior role. It has its own role of communicating meaning. And much more seriously, extend Wittgenstein little more. I mean, I'm extending, Professor Pannisalam should forgive me, don't beat me in the class. I'm just playing with analytic tradition to what extent I can inherit culturally in my soul. So that is the kind of reflection. I thought I should be a little more original when we talk about analytic tradition without communicating analytic tradition in all its technicality. The extension point of Wittgenstein is this, that when language is meaningful in terms of its multiple utility, in terms of its multiple textual contextualities, in terms of its uses, the word becomes alive. When I use a word right now, in the way I perform my philosophy right now, I become alive. Not only I become alive, that words become alive. It speaks to us much more intimate manner. So put it across, this heterogeneity of meaning affects the continent philosophy very seriously. This heterogeneity of cultural plurality has affected social science. Now philosophy, analytic tradition, usually accused of being a privileged class discussion within a technical group of friends, is moving beyond its own territory in a very, very comfortable and a much more meaningful way. The cultural plurality have their own meaning in their own possibility. It is something one has to love, honor the analytic tradition, especially Wittgensteinian tradition. That this plurality of meaningfulness can be understood, appreciated, not from one context, from another context, but from the context into which you should be thrown open. I can enjoy volleyball so far as I know volleyball, its rules and functionalities. Otherwise, if I know only football, I'd be joking at volleyball players, why these fellows are playing the ball in their hand? They could play the ball in my foot. In foot is the only game. So when I say only my perspective or my political ideology is the only game, that it has to rule the entire continent, nationality, I think we are playing a wrong game. We are not only playing a wrong game, the game loses its significance of being a game. And that takes you to another important idea, inspiring idea, let me call it spiritual idea, the form of life that Wittgenstein talks about. If I can cherish, the word is participate. Participate. You cherish it. You eat a chocolate, you cherish it. Without eating the chocolate, if you say, well, that chocolate, that is non-vegetarian. This is vegetarian chocolate. If you classify in terms of attributed meaning historically, that attributed meaning has to be also be got into it. You have to swim into the pond in order to know what is swimming. Put it in a way, we belong to forms of life, and that form of life is something Heidegger takes that inspiration very seriously. The form of life, the worldview. So I can understand my friend or the fellow being insofar as I participate in the everydayness of his life. Unless and until, if I am divorced from it, I will be doing a kind of monolithic politics, the Hegelian politics, perhaps the perspective politics with which philosophers are very famous, traditionally famous. Let me simply shift back again to my one of few more things. I talk about J.L. Austin. I think J.L. Austin is a good friend, English-speaking world. I'm just picking up that idea, to what extent that idea is much more useful, culturally implying to me. The idea is that whenever we speak a language, whenever we communicate, not only in English, in any other language, that language should have a performative role. This is something that I think we have to cherish that idea. I'm again, forgive me, professors, technical philosophers, to use exploiting this analytic tradition in this manner. I'm exploiting it for a reasonability, justifiable within the reasonability of our analytic tradition. When J.L. Austin makes an insight that our language that we utter and our utterance must be performative, he adds one more statement, one more positioning, that utterance must be sincere. It's a wonderful. Read all the election manifestos of the parties that are being done around the world today or around the Indian continent. How many statements are using the J.L. Austin analysis? How many of them are fallacious and how many statements are infallacious? How many of those statements are performative? How many of that electoral promises are non-performative nature? And if you teach philosophy to the common public, probably we are away from the common public, you will not be invited to for a TV talk to talk about all this because you will never understand. I have never seen Professor Panniselvam or Mishra in the normal common TV to talk about all this. They will be misunderstood rather than correctly understood. So the electoral language, for as a body of language, my question is, employing J.L. Austin analysis or insight, to what extent they are performative ability, performable, and whether that performable is fallacious. That means sincere or insincere. So this question should continually haunt us. When J.L. Austin talks about our language is meaningful insofar as they are sincerely performative. And now you just make a self-conscious question, how many times in our interviews or in our execution of our thesis or in our utterances, in our defenses, we have been sincerely performative. This again, I'm telling you, analytic philosophy self-addresses itself. It becomes conscious of being, what is the sense of being human in a self-conscious level, in much more deeper sense. Analytic philosophy is a kind of an invitation that I should become conscious the way that I picture myself into the world. I'm just shifting on quickly. With me?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So I'm just making the last, I'm cut charting everything. So my basic question, Professor Panni and my friends, is this, that analytic philosophy, not that unlike continental philosophy, analytic philosophical discussion, insights have a lot of implication in cultural. By referring to Wittgenstein, I was talking about Wittgenstein and J.L. Austin, I was talking about how much of our language is performative, which is sincere. I'm making a last reference, cutting the last two references. One reference to G.U. Moore, the concept of good, the sense of being good. Now, G.U. Moore makes a very important distinction that the sense of being good and the good cannot be what I call propositionally analyzed. In other words, the good is an elusive terminology by which you cannot make a normative decision about that X being good and Y is being bad. Or a particular social practice is good, another social practice is bad. A particular culture is good, another culture is bad. Because the difficulty in defining what I call the theoretical defining in what is called good, I think a lot of inspiration can be also learned from G. Moore. The last but one, I just make a reference so that I leave room for listening to all of us, so that my continuity of my communication with me should not be stopped. That Searle making an analysis of the constitutive or constitutional rules and the regulative rules. That human life or language is rule bound, number one. This rule bounded language can also be implied that every culture is rule bound. Every culture has its own regulative rules of governance, has its own constitutive or constitutive rules of governance. But applying or extending, pulling Searle's much more in an applicable sense, which rule is constitutive in our culture? Can we take racism as the constitutional of our culture? Can we take casteism as the constitutional of our culture of being human? And what are those temporal rules which are habituated through right or wrong religious notions, that these are my only constitutive rules by which I would have to relate with the world? So the warning, the inspiration of Searle, I take it very seriously that life is rule bound, language is rule bound, but what are the rules, whether that rules are justifiable? Now, putting all of them together, my only contention with you today is that thank you very much. I'm sorry for the technical difficulty that I had. My only contention is that analytic philosophy has gone beyond its own realm. It has moved into the territory of culture, language, and affects. The continental philosophers' question regarding the world or the rightness of the goodness of the world, of the contemporary society, is preceded by analytic inspiration. And entire inspiration comes from one strong inspiration that comes from analytic tradition is that truth is construed in different contexts. And that construction is only historical construction. One can relate only in interpretative manner, not in the sense of truth functional manner. So these are some of the things I find much more useful, that one can learn, enter the door of analytic philosophy totally from a different angle, leaving alone these technical jargons of analytic tradition. Thank you very much for your patience. I'm really sorry for the technical difficulty that has happened. Thank you very much, all of you. Ravikumar, I wish the entire discussion today very successful. I know Professor Pannisalvam, Shikala, Professor Ramakrishnan, everybody there, I would be happy to listen to them in continuation. Thank you, and my good friend Mishra. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your excellent keynote address, sir. Now I invite Professor S. Pannisalvam. He is going to talk about phenomenology of language, Wittgenstein and beyond.
Thank you, Dr. Ravikumar, for arranging this wonderful program of ICPR celebrating the World Philosophy Day. It's a very important day for us, that is World Philosophy Day. And Dr. Ravikumar has chosen a wonderful theme and also excellent speaker, of course, speakers, but I'm not including my name in that list because I'm not of that good speaker. But anyhow, I'll try my best. And we thank Professor Lourdunathan for making an excellent exposition of the analytic philosophy but in his own way. What I am going to do in my presentation is to discuss the phenomenology of language, Wittgenstein and beyond, or after Wittgenstein. Of course, Lourdunathan has pointed out that it was Professor H.R.T. Roberts of Madras Christian College who taught us analytical philosophy. It is very much essential for me also to remember the great service rendered by Professor H.R.T. Roberts, who has trained some of us in analytic philosophy. But there is also another philosopher whom I want to refer here, Professor R. Sundararajan. He was from Tamil Nadu, but later he settled in Pune University. He was one of the leading philosophers of both analytic as well as continental philosophy. So I am using the methodology given by both Professor H.R.T. Roberts and Professor Sundararajan in order to examine the concept of phenomenology of language. Let me start. In the 20th century, we talk about what is known as the linguistic turn. The linguistic turn is a very important movement wherein we talk about the role of language, that is, language becoming a predominant concept in 20th century. For this reason, Gilbert Ryle said that the preoccupation of philosophers in the 20th century is to discuss language. So language or language analysis is something very much important for the 20th century as well as 21st century philosophers. Now in language or in analytic philosophy in general, we talk about three concepts: thought, language, and reality. There is an inseparable relation between thinking and language. A thought which is not expressed by language is not a thought at all. So I am going to discuss this aspect from both from the analytical tradition as well as the continental tradition. These are the two important movements. That is, we call it Anglo-Saxon philosophy, in which we can place, that is, I said that there exists an inseparable relation between thought, language, and reality. And this is what has been emphasized from the ancient time onwards. And I said that there are two important traditions. One is the Anglo-Saxon tradition, which is represented, I would say, by the analytic philosophy. And the other important tradition or movement is the continental philosophy, where phenomenology has been playing a very important role. So as I said in the beginning, my humble attempt here is to synthesize the two great traditions, the analytical philosophical tradition or Anglo-Saxon philosophical tradition, and the continental tradition, especially the phenomenological tradition. And one can see the confluence between these two great traditions. Because there are philosophers in India and abroad also who consider that there is a rift between the analytic philosophy and the continental philosophy. My view is that there is no rift at all. even if there is a rift, that rift can easily be overcome. So this is my basic idea here. And here mostly I follow the methodology given by some of the phenomenological thinkers like Sundararajan and others. I would like to quote here Gadamer from the Western tradition and T.R.V. Murthy from Indian tradition. Gadamer, for example, said, all thinking about language is already once again drawn back into language. We can only think in language, and just this residing of our thinking in a language is a profound enigma that language presents to thought. From this quotation, you can understand how Gadamer is also concerned about the interrelation that exists between thought and language. And the same idea, more or less, has been expressed by Professor T.R.V. Murthy. T.R.V. Murthy says the problem of what we can know is closely bound up with the question of what we can say. It is only thought as expressed in words that can be understood, communicated, and criticized. Language, this is very important, language is not an accidental, dispensable garb which could be put off and put on. It grows with thought, or rather, thought grows with it. These two quotations very clearly show that both for Indian as well as Western thinkers, taking representation from Gadamer and T.R.V. Murthy, one can say that there exists an inseparable relation between thought and language. So, it is through the medium of language one can express his thought to another. So, a proper understanding of language provides a route to the understanding of a thought and reality. Though the 20th century has been termed as the linguistic turn in philosophy, if we read the Western philosophy from the beginning, one can understand that philosophers have been talking about language. For example, Plato's work, Cratylus, Aristotle's Categories, Locke's, John Locke's, an essay concerning human understanding, and Berkeley's Alciphron are some of the work that were discussed, discussed the role of language. So this means the relation between thought and language is not new among the 20th century philosophers. That is, from the Greek time onwards, especially in Heraclitus and Democritus, we can see the significance of language. But what is significant in 18th, 19th and 20th century is that there is what is called a renewal of interest in language. And this was due to the contribution made by J.G. Herder, Humboldt, Max Muller, and others. And here I must also mention Ernest Cassirer's very important book, The Philosophy of Symbolic Forms, then Urban's Language and Reality, and Susan Langer's Philosophy in a New Key. All these are very important books with regard to language. But the preoccupation of language, as I said at the beginning, that it has become the occupational disease of the philosophers in the 20th century. That is where we differ from the Greek philosophy and the 20th century philosophy. Because in 20th century philosophy, because of Wittgenstein, Russell, and others, the main focus was on language. So language has become the core theme of philosophers. So in the 20th century, we come across two important movements. One is the logical positivism, and the other is the ordinary language philosophy. So this movements actually gave a scope for understanding and reinterpreting language. And in fact, the contribution made by G. Moore, Gilbert Ryle, Austin, whom our good friend has mentioned, Strawson, Searle, Intica, Dummett, Kripke. These are some of the thinkers who elaborately discuss the role of language. But what is significant is that Wittgenstein has given a new methodology for handling language. Very beautifully, Professor Lourdunathan has pointed out the significance of Wittgenstein in the context of analytical philosophy. We are very grateful to him. I would like to see Wittgenstein purely from the philosophical side, in the sense that Wittgenstein has given a new direction to philosophy by taking analytical philosophy, in which language is playing a very dominant role. In fact, here I would like to quote one important thinker. Some of you are aware of this name, K.O. Appel. Apple has written a very wonderful article. The title of this article is Wittgenstein and the Problem of Hermeneutic Understanding, wherein he argues that how in the writings of Wittgenstein, understanding, in quote, understanding plays a very important role. Of course, I would say, though we make a distinction between the earlier and later Wittgenstein, Professor Lourdunathan made a very nice distinction. Though we made a distinction between early Wittgenstein and later Wittgenstein, in both periods or in both Wittgenstein, you see the role of understanding. So understanding has been the main focus of Wittgenstein, both in two writings, in two of his writings, that is the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus and later the basic book of philosophical investigation. So one can see how the significance of language is important for Wittgenstein. Now, with this, I would like to show how the concept of understanding has been playing a very important role in phenomenology also. As in the case of analytic philosophy, in the phenomenology also, the concept of understanding plays a significant role. One more thinker whom I would like to refer here is Peter Winch. He interprets Wittgenstein in order to show that how understanding could play a major role in philosophical tradition. And also, Peter Winch has pointed out that there is a problem in understanding the real nature of language. He says that most of the time we misuse language or we misunderstand language. So what is the best way of doing philosophy? The best way or the best method of doing philosophy is by treating the root of the disease. What is the disease? That misunderstanding of philosophical concepts. So by removal of this misunderstanding of philosophical concepts, we can cure the disease. How? Wittgenstein says in the investigation, philosophy is the clearing away of misunderstanding, nonsense, and the bumps of the understanding. So this quotation from philosophical investigation clearly shows that philosophy can help us in understanding the concepts properly. Now, what does this mean? This means that there should be a movement from misunderstanding to understanding. And further, Wittgenstein would say that proper understanding and knowledge is possible through the intersubjectivity or through the public sphere. Now, this intersubjectivity is something which has been very much stressed in the phenomenological tradition. So by intersubjectivity, all of us know that we cannot have a private language. If I make a language of my own, then I will not be in a position to communicate my ideas with Professor Lourdunathan. So language means it is always public. Language means there should at least exist two persons. I communicate and the other person receives my communication. So Wittgenstein gives a new methodology of understanding, and this is how one has to view Wittgenstein in the context of language. So what I'm trying to say is that in Wittgenstein, not only the concept of meaning is discussed, because normally we talk about the two great theories which he has offered. One is the picture theory of meaning, and the other is the use theory of meaning. That's right. But there is also another way of understanding Wittgenstein, that is through the concept of understanding, because I am stressing this concept of understanding because this would help me to go further in the phenomenological framework. I would like to quote one more thinker, two thinkers. One is G.P. Baker and P.M.S. Hecker. They have written one book. The title of the book is Wittgenstein, Understanding and Meaning. This is the title of the book. Both of them argue that meaning, explanation of meaning, and understanding are a triad of concepts whose interconnections is focused by Wittgenstein in philosophical investigation. And they argue that the anti-psychologism of Tractatus has to be rejected, and its place we have to think of the concept of understanding. See, here you can see how there is a shift in the concept of meaning. That is, from meaning in quotes, we have moved towards understanding, wherein we say that the intersubjectivity is important, or the other is important. Outside the social practice, a word has no meaning. This has been emphasized by Wittgenstein in detail. So the purpose here is to show the confluence between Anglo-Saxon philosophy, that is analytical philosophy, and the continental philosophy, that is phenomenological understanding. So one of the important movements which has emerged in the 20th century or after this World War I is the phenomenological movement. This method of phenomenology, or the phenomenological method, according to Husserl, is the only way of making philosophy a rigorous science. There is one converging point between analytic philosophy and phenomenological movement. What is that? Both these movements, the analytic philosophy as well as phenomenological movement, talk about what is known as the presuppositionless philosophy. Because most of the time, that is from the time of Plato up to Heidegger, we have been told that philosophy is full of presupposition. But the analytical philosophy as well as the phenomenological movement tell us that philosophy can be presuppositionless. So for these two movements, there is no place for any presupposition. So this is one of the important converging point between these two movements. Then there is also another converging point between these two traditions, and this has been pointed out by George Gadamer. He says that normally it is said that phenomenology has its focus on transcendental philosophy, whereas in Anglo-Saxon philosophy, it is on positivism. This is a major view or major criticism against these two. But Gadamer says it is not so. He says, if you have a closer look at these two traditions, one would understand that the apparent contradiction can easily be transcended. So this has to be taken into account while discussing these two great thinkers. And Gadamer argues that in Wittgenstein, the problem of language is central from the beginning, and even there it gains its full philosophical universality only when its thought matures. That means, according to Gadamer, there is a philosophical development in the writings of Wittgenstein. Very beautifully, Professor Lourdunathan has pointed out how, when there is a shift from the later to, early to later Wittgenstein, Wittgenstein was more concerned about the social activity in the later period. So this the social aspect or the significance of what we call the social sphere or public sphere is something which has been very much emphasized both in phenomenological tradition as well as Wittgensteinian tradition or analytical tradition. And phenomenology as a philosophical movement is committed to new form of concrete thinking. Edmund Husserl took it from the hands of Brentano and given a new methodology for phenomenological understanding. But we must also remember the fact that phenomenology has taken different dimensions in the hands of Heidegger, Sartre, Merleau-Ponty, and others. This means there is what is called the multiple interpretations of phenomenology. So it all depends on which interpretation of phenomenology you are subscribing to. For example, Sartre used this in the framework of freedom or the question of freedom. Then Merleau-Ponty used it for the bodily relation to the world. And Ricoeur, I'm going to talk about Ricoeur, so I am making a reference to him now. Ricoeur used phenomenology in its application for a new interpretation of signs and symbols in the field of religion, myth and metaphor. And Derrida, of course, has shown the limitations of phenomenology. But what is important is that all these phenomenological masters, I would say, has given a new methodology for understanding the phenomenological movement. Of course, I have a feeling that analytical philosophy, though it gives us the proper method of analysis, the method of analysis is not something new for us, because from Indian tradition, from the time of Shankara, we can see how the analysis has been playing a very important role in our understanding. But what is unique in analytical philosophy is that they used the method of analysis for understanding all problems of philosophy. This is what Malcolm says. He says, though analysis has been very much there in the philosophical understanding, the significance of Wittgenstein and others is they made the method of analysis very popular by applying it to all philosophical concepts. But there is a problem. In fact, there is a joke about the analytical philosophy or the method of analysis. What is that? I want to go to, say, Madurai. So I am asking my friend Lourdunathan how to go to Madurai. Then he is asking me, how long you will be in Madurai? I said, 5 days. Whom are you going to meet? I said, I am going to meet X, Y, Z. So when will you come back? What mode of transport? Now with this, we try to understand. In fact, it is said the analytical philosophers use air splitting analysis. But whether this air splitting analysis can solve all the problems of philosophy is a question which one can debate. But no doubt the significance of analytical philosophy is something very important, and we have to appreciate Bertrand Russell, Wittgenstein, and others, early, later, etc. But let me see how in phenomenological movement the role of understanding is celebrated. One thinker whom I would like to discuss here is Heidegger, very briefly, of course. Heidegger is of the view that all interpretation is based on understanding. In fact, he says understanding consists in its possibility of understanding. That is, understanding must allow the possibility. What is that? In understanding, two questions, he says, are fundamental. One is, what is the structure of understanding and how to reach it? So Heidegger says, if we answer these two questions, then perhaps one can understand the significance or the role of understanding. Now, language, according to him, is the house of being, right? So this made some to say that language and being are the same. So it is argued that being is a house and hence being is language. Now, this is somewhat similar to our Spotavada theory in Indian tradition. Especially, you see this in the letter on humanism written by Heidegger, wherein he says, "Thought," I quote him, "that thought gathers language in simple demonstrative saying. Language is thus the language of being, as the clouds are the clouds of the sky." So it is very clear from this that language is identified with the supreme or being, one can say. This makes us to go further in order to see how the phenomenological tradition has been celebrating the significance of language. For example, in the continental tradition, we see the significance of language, which is very much expressed by Gadamer. Gadamer is one thinker whom I always admire for the main reason in his philosophical hermeneutics, he could see how in philosophical discourse, meaning and understanding and interpretation are playing a very important role. And in fact, Habermas, who writes extensively on Gadamer as well as Wittgenstein, argues that in the hands of Gadamer, language has attained the third dimension. Friends, here what I would like to state here is, as I said in the beginning, I'm trying to show the confluence or the interrelation that exists between phenomenology and the analytical philosophy. The analytical philosophy has given the two dimensions of language, is what Habermas says. Two dimensions of language has been supported by Wittgenstein. The first dimension of language was shaped by the early Wittgenstein, wherein the significance of ideal language is exhibited. And in the second dimension of language, we see language is connected to society or a form of life. Professor Lourdunathan has also pointed out the language has a form of life. So language, which means language has to be understood only in the context of the social values or norms. So these are the two dimensions of language, Habermas says. But he says, but in the hands of Gadamer, language has attained the third dimension. What is the third dimension? He says the third dimension of language to be seen in Gadamer's approach towards tradition. That is, by employing tradition in language, in the role of language, Gadamer could show the third dimension of language. But at the same time, Habermas says there is some problem with regard to the tradition which Gadamer speaks about. Now, what is important here is that in the continental tradition, especially in Heidegger or in the writing of Gadamer or in Habermas, you see that language acquiring a new dimension. Though Habermas appreciates the significance of language of Wittgenstein, later Wittgenstein, he says Wittgenstein failed to see or fails to understand that language has to be used as a social theory. In fact, Habermas went to the extent of saying language sometimes is used to control the society. So it is it also gives a space for power and domination. So this aspect, that is how language can make power or create power, has not been properly examined by Wittgenstein. This is a view maintained by Habermas, and Habermas, I would say, is quite right. But we cannot blame Wittgenstein for this, in fact, because that was the beginning of a new theory of language. And in this new theory of language, we are able to see that how language can have different dimensions or different perspective. But now, that is, by using the methodology of Habermas and others, we are able to show that language has other dimensions also. Those social dimensions is explained by Wittgenstein. the other dimension of language, that is language, how language is used as a tool to control others, how language has power, all this were not properly examined by Wittgenstein, but we cannot blame Wittgenstein for that. Now, with this background, I would like to come to one important thinker, that is Paul Ricoeur, who is a continental philosopher who made a very significant contribution, because Ricoeur is one who could show a new direction to philosophy of language or a linguistic philosophy. So I thought it would be very much essential for me to say, to talk about Ricoeur. With Ricoeur I close, of course. Now, in Ricoeur has written a very beautiful book, that is, I would say it is a magnum opus of Ricoeur, that is The Rule of Metaphor. The Rule of Metaphor, a very important book, wherein he clearly shows how there is language. What is the basic unit of language? Sometimes it is said the word is the basic unit of language, and sometimes it is argued that sentence is the basic unit of language. So, keeping this in mind, the development of philosophy of language, Paul Ricoeur says that it is true that we have moved from a word to sentence, and sentence to philosophy of language. This means that we talk about sentences which convey the meaning, but while using sentences in a framework of language, we communicate. So he calls it a philosophy of language, wherein we communicate, we speak to others, we listen to others, so we borrow our ideas. So all these are possible in philosophy of language. So he says this is a very beautiful development. What is the development? From word we have moved to sentence, and sentence we have moved to philosophy of language, where language is a mode of communication. Because in sentence, if I say bring the white cow, no doubt it gives a meaning, but further dialogue is not possible. The further dialogue is possible if the hearer or if the listener is there to say something. So this means this is what we call the development of language, or to put it in broader framework, the philosophy of language. So up to this philosophy of language, the contribution made by the linguistic philosophers or philosophy of language is something remarkable, and it is quite acceptable, fine. But Ricoeur says that there should be another movement, that is from philosophy of language. He says we have to move towards what is known as a discourse. In discourse, he says there is a participation. When I say something, I immediately expect the listener to say something, and as a result of that, a dialogue takes place. Because now, language is possible when there is a dialogue. Language is not possible in a monologue. So this means philosophy of language, though it's a very development, very important school of thought, the contribution made by these great thinkers like Searle, Austin, and others, performative sentences, what Professor Lourdunathan has pointed out, all these are fine. But he says that further development is necessary, and that is possible through discourse. Now, here discourse, we mean participation. We give importance to the listener, what the others are saying are important, so that we can enter into a meaningful dialogue. So this has been very much stressed by Paul Ricoeur in this rule of metaphor. And one more point which Ricoeur has emphasized is that whenever we talk about something, when we convey a meaning, and Professor Lourdunathan has pointed out the meaning of meaning. In fact, long back I have written one article, meaning of meaning, wherein, because now that is a very interesting remark which he has made, because it is normally we say that whenever I utter a word table or a rose, it refers to rose or it refers to table. The meaning is clear. But the question that could be raised here is, why does the word table refers to table and not chair? So this means there is something which is implied in the concept of meaning. This is what we call the meaning of meaning. And long back, the book Ogden and Richards have written a book, The Meaning of Meaning, in 1955, I think. So this concept of meaning is very important. Now, Ricker says, in the context of meaning, in quotes, there is a way by which one can understand the meaning. What does this mean? This means, he says, when you read a text for the first time, you get some understanding. This is a literal meaning of the text, of the sentence, or the statement which is available to you. But he says, besides this, there is an inner meaning which is concealed in the text or in the statement. What does this mean? This means when you read something, you read it literally, which means you get the literal meaning, what I would say the peripheral meaning. But this is what he calls it direct meaning. Okay, this is how our communication takes place. But besides this, he says there is a indirect meaning or implicit meaning which is implied in the text or which is implied in somebody uttering the statement. So this indirect meaning is something which is playing a very important role in giving a new meaning to the text or to the statement. I would like to quote Wittgenstein, because in the Tractatus Wittgenstein, the beginning says, this book contains two parts. The first part is what is written, and the part two is what is not written. And what is not written is important, he says. This means that when you read something for the first time, the meaning that is conveyed is good, of course, something is conveyed, so you are able to understand. But besides this, there is some inner meaning. That's why we are talking about reading between the lines. There is something which is implied, and that could be known only by the listener or the hearer. Now, this could be applied to the reading of text, how a text can have multiple meaning. So you see how the meaning is shifted. Once we said, Wittgenstein himself said in the Tractatus, the meaning means it can only refer only one thing. Now, in the later Wittgenstein, as Luther has pointed out, that it can have multiple meaning by using language, game, and all that one. That's right. So language is contextual, language has multiple meaning and all that one. That's fine. But here, I mean, this is a methodology which was further developed by Derrida and others. That's why he talks about the postponement of meaning or deferring the meaning. Now, Ricker argues that in the indirect meaning, something which is hidden in the text is made possible, which means it is known only by the reader, who can reread the text, and so that some inner meaning which is implied in the text could be understood. So this is a beautiful way of understanding the concept of meaning. Friends, we have traveled from the concept of understanding. You remember I started with the statement that saying that understanding is something new, and understanding is different from meaning, because understanding, of course, makes meaning complete and comprehensible. But now we are talking about something called indirect meaning, which is implicit in the text or which is available in the reader. I mean, which is available in the author. So my job as a listener or as a reader is to cull out the meaning which is important in this text, whether it is oral or written. Now, this has got a lot of application, I would say, in the social sphere of meaning. Now, I'm concentrating for few minutes on Ludu's very beautiful exposition and how he talks about the cultural implications of analytical philosophy. That is a very, very important and significant aspect, because we have to look at philosophy or any movement like analytical philosophy or quantitative philosophy in the social context and see how it can make an impact on our life, whether it is cultural, political, or social. Now, what is the meaning that is implied in Ricker? Now, I'll give one example, and then with that, I think I'll stop. It'll take just 2 or 3 minutes. Now, Ricker makes a distinction between a sign and symbol in this context. A sign and a symbol. Now, what is a sign? A sign simply represents something. For example, a bell ringing. or if my good friend Ravi bells a ring, then I have to stop. That means my talk is over, something like that. So it has got only one meaning. But a symbol has got multiple meaning. It could be interpreted. It could be interpreted in the social context, and one can see how it can have plurality of meaning, and the role of the reader as well as the speaker or the author. What does this mean? This means when the author conveys something, right? When the author conveys something, he has not one particular aim, he has got multiple aims. But most of the time, the author conveys only one idea, and he always wants to improve his writing, but most of the time it is not possible. I'll give one example. All of us know the critique of pure reason of Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant wrote it and kept it for more than 10 years, thinking that he would improve, and but he could not improve it. In the meantime, he fell ill, and he thought that he has to, release a book, publish it. So what is implied is sometimes is not conveyed. So it is a duty of the reader or the listener who can see, who can enter into the text and see the meaning which is implicit in the text. Now coming back to Ricker, now you can apply the same methodology to Ricker, because Ricker very rightly said that there is a distinction between sign and symbol. Sign is something constant; it has got only one meaning, one understanding. But symbol has got multiple meaning. This multiple meaning which is implied in the text could be referred to as symbol. I would like to apply this in a Dalit discourse, and with that I stop. Now in Dalit discourse, all of us know that the use of drums, beating of drums, right? Once, unfortunately, it was considered as something inferior, because no, that's how we have been talking about drum beating, right? It was considered as something inauspicious and all that one. But now, so it is a symbol. Drum beating is a symbol. But now you can see in many of the universities, I know in Madras University also, the journalism department teaches a course or teach the students how to beat drums. No, because it has become a very important activity. So you can see once it was considered as something inferior, now it has become the proud, not only of the Dalits, but the proud of all communities, which means you see the drum beating is a symbol. What I'm trying to say is the drum beating is a symbol. Once it was considered as wrongly, of course, it is considered as inferior, or it is unfortunately allotted to some people. But now we are able to see that there is a new way of interpreting this drum beating, which means the meaning. Now you apply that the concept of symbol as well as a double intentionality. One is first you read it from the text, and it is said that drum beating is something very inferior. But now we are able to see the inner meaning. It is a proud of the moment, I would say. In fact, I also want to learn this drum beating because it represents our culture. It represents the value which is connected to people. So it is my own tradition, South Indian tradition, Tamil tradition. So the double intentionality of understanding symbol now gives me an indirect meaning, which was all these centuries considered inferior, and now it is considered as something superior in the sense that the direct meaning which was assigned to it in the beginning is now replaced by a new meaning. So this is possible provided you reject the old meaning and in its place something is given. So in this way you can apply. I made an attempt to apply Paul Ricker's the methodology to our Dalit discourse and see that how this could be understood in Indian context. So So what I'm trying to say is, with this I conclude, what I'm trying to say is that Ricker has given a new methodology for understanding the notion of symbol, and there is always two kinds of meaning. One is indirect, direct meaning, which has to be replaced by this indirect meaning. And the indirect meaning conveys the inner idea which exhibits the culture or the value of the people. So the one more sentence I close from the beginning, that is, the analytical philosophy has been playing a very important role, no doubt. And similarly, the phenomenological movement has been playing a very important role. What I try to show is that there should be a confluence between the analytical philosophy and a phenomenological movement or continental philosophy, and this is a way we can have a dialogue with these two great traditions. And secondly, the concept of meaning has now changed. That is, from meaning, in quotes, we have moved to understanding, and in later Wittgenstein we have gone to social understanding, wherein we consider language as something social custom, which means the other is important. There is no private language and all that one. And but at the same time, I also pointed out that Wittgenstein method of understanding language, which is emphasized in Tractatus, has some difficulties, has some limitations, I would say, but which has been solved or transcended by Habermas. And then I discussed how Ricker, one of the representative thinkers of the phenomenological movement, has given a new methodology for understanding the concept of meaning by developing the distinction between sign and symbol on the one side and the direct and indirect meaning. So this division of direct and indirect meaning can have a direct bearing on our life. So similarly, we can extend all philosophical concepts in a broader perspective, so that we can make philosophy more meaningful. In fact, here I really appreciate the attempt made by Lourdunathan for looking at analytical philosophy from a different perspective. This is a very important methodology, which must be taken very seriously by all of us. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm sorry if I exceeded time, Raviji.
No problem, sir. No problem. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your.
Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hello.
Professor Paneer, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Great.
Sir, can I?
Now I invite Professor G. Misra, Professor of Philosophy, IIT Bhubaneswar, former Head Department of Philosophy, University of Madras, Chennai, former Member Secretary, ICPR, New Delhi. Now he is going to talk about Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam.
Okay, friends, all distinguished participants, Professor Panneerselvam, Lourdunathan, Srikala and others, thanks to Professor Ravikumar for this organization of this webinar in celebrating the World Philosophy Day. And after going through the Western philosophy of language and the modern, so to say, like what has happened in the world philosophical scenario after so-called linguistic philosophy, as pointed out by Professor Panneerselvam, let me take you to a topic which was assigned by Professor Ravikumar. I don't know the reason, but he wanted to listen everything about India in this topic called Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Friends, it is a very loaded topic, because what it actually means, how it has been politicized, and it has been politicized by everybody. In India, this is a statement from the Upanishads, and West it realized in its modern incarnation as globalization. So, friends, we have been subjected to the globalization, its merits and demerits, advantages and disadvantages, how the subaltern is ignored in globalization, and all that we have already seen and realized. What I am going to do today is to bring before you some Indian ethos about this idea, this statement called Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Friends, as you know, the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is only a slogan, so to say, and this has been more pointed out recently by Edward Swayze in his Orientalism, as well as to some extent in a different way, Fred Dalmyer beyond Orientalism. Now we are in a period when the West is not looking at us in the same way as it used to. China, followed by India, has made it to see perceive us in a different way. There are certain advantages and disadvantages, but one thing that has happened because of this globalization, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, I very vaguely translate to just a minute. Sorry. I have translated Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam as globalization, very, very vague translation, but I will be coming to that in a short while. There are certain advantages and disadvantages in this, but with the modernity setting in, day by day, the technology is improving. Our voice is no more the voice of ours only, it is the global voice. Problems continue, the marginalization increases, but the ideal of global village sharing each other's woes and worries is something that has happened, and in this context we shall be discussing. From our problems that we encounter, and if there is any piece from the tradition that can address this problem. This is something, a line from the Mahopanishad engraved in the entrance of our parliament. And the verse goes, Ayam Bandhuhu, this is a Mahopanishad verse, Ayam Bandhuhu, Paroveti, Ganana Laghuchetasam, Udara Charitanam tu Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. It says, this is mine and that is not mine. It is something considered, taken into account by the people of average intellect, people of low intellect, low wisdom. But those who are broad-minded, those who are wise, for them the earth is one family. The globe is one family. So this is quoted by Narayana Pandita in the Hitopadesha also. So one thing I wanted to bring before you in giving the meaning of the word that is Vasudha, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, Vasudha is not Vishwa. Vasudha is the immediate earth that we are encountering or when we are living with. It is earth. It is not the Vishwa. It is not the other regions as has been enunciated in the tradition or as has been enunciated in the philosophical systems. So there is a difference between the world and earth, and Vasudha stands for earth. So we have similar many such things in Tamil literature. A large number of such things where in Purgapium, in many literature, Tirukural especially, in Purananuru, we have perception of the world as a family. In Purananuru, we have this line, Yadam Ore Yavarum Kelir. So every place is my home and every person is my relative. So that is what is being spoken in the Gita also, like a person will not have any hatred for the other if he sees himself, he sees the other in himself. I quote the Sanskrit passage, Yastu Sarvani Bhutani Atmanyeva Nupashyati Sarva Bhutesu Jatmanam Tato na Vijigupsute. A person who sees everybody in himself and himself in the other would not have any hatred for the other. Friends, this makes me to bring the idea that this is a utopian idea. There is no scope for it only says that there is no scope for hatred since there is nothing separate from the self. This is a it is a statement of daydreaming utopian. It is not possible in the world we are living in, where everything has to be taken differently for interaction. But there are two things. One is vision, another is action. The action should be based on the vision, and vision should not get distorted by our action. What is happening today in the world is we have made several worlds within one world because of our action, where in the vision has been sent on a holiday. So of late, this has become, as I told you, this has become a slogan for politicizing. However, the crux lies in invoking an idea of unity, which is, as I told you, far-fetched and utopian, because it is not possible, as I feel, to perceive a world unity, and I will come to that very shortly. It was Krishnan who, while speaking on Gandhian philosophy, said that the whole concept of non-violence and satyagraha, the two terms which are the core principle of love as far as Gandhi is concerned, it is a Gandhian creed and strategy that is in invoking these two terms of love. One is non-violence, another is satyagraha. It is all-inclusive attitude of multiculturalism and universalism. Okay, like Gandhi did practice this in his life to some extent. It is an extension of love and to be universal, wherein one will see the universality as a picture of your own being. Vivekananda also has spoken about this. He says, all differences in this world are only in degree and not of kind, because oneness is the secret of everything. But it is only a statement. How much oneness the world has realized is something we have all seen. Now, there is no truth. There is about the thing that the world is going through. The world is going through a difficult time. This is the basic problem that we have, is the problem of man being a part of the world, and how we have to see the world is what it is invoked in this line called Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The modern man and the ideal man are two different things. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam invokes an ideal man, saying that how the modern man is tranquilized by the false security and think that modern security can help us to have a better life. Friends, I would like to tell you that, the way we are going, I don't think there is any future for this earth. The concretization, the making the world a village made out of concrete and the cement and concrete, making using the water in an unproportionate way, the earth would not be able to take up the exploitation that it is subjected to. So it has happened because of hegemonistic thinking, because of creating many worlds within one world and the sense of superiority of the colonizers and the oppression of the marginalized. See, everywhere this has been happening, large scale, internationally, small scale, nationally, even a smaller scale, in a state level, this has been going on, and the realizing the ideal of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam remains to be a far-fetching ideal, and it can only be celebrated in the thinking stage. At that level, it is worth thinking, worth contemplating. Recently, I think during COVID, L. Subramaniam has brought out a musical rendering of this verse in London Symphony. I heard that in television. But today, I will take you to the ancient Indian philosophy, how they have thought about this, the earth as a family, earth as a village, earth as a smaller segment of a society. As like earth as a small village, earth as a small society, like in the universe. But as I told you, they are in this verse, what is highlighted is Vasudha, not Vishwa. There is a difference between Vasudha and Vishwa. Vishwa takes the upper regions of the trans-terrestrial regions into account. But we are talking about the earth. Friends, today, in this morning, I was trying to remember what Professor Palkalai was talking about Professor Sundar Rajan. Professor Sundar Rajan, once in one of his talks, spoke about the necessity to emphasize the terrestrial problem, though the earth has the center of ecological discourse. He said that instead of ecology, we should use the word ecosophy, and in that we should have the earth as the center of discourse and not the environment as such, even though it is trans-terrestrial, it has trans-terrestrial implications. He spoke at large about the need that the attention should be given to earth, and that has not happened while with the onset or the preeminence of science in the 19th, 20th century. It is only I will come to Descartes a little later, but I would like to say that when the earth has become together is when we fight with something. Even in a family we have different differences, but when we fight with another person, another family, we get together. So that is visible in this pandemic, a beautiful transformation with the pandemic when the whole world has come together to fight against COVID-19. If it is something that can be physically fought, America would have sent all its drones and it would not have taken more than a few minutes to fight out the COVID-19, but could not do anything at a period when nuclear powers have become useless. What started as a small virus in a small province in China became a global pandemic, and the world has come together to fight against this pandemic. Imagine, this is the world Kutumbakam. The earth is becoming together, becoming a one unit only when it is fighting. So this is a new thing that I wanted to speak about today. That when Ravi told me that Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, where it is realized now with the onset of Corona, and when the world is being together, including China where it was started, where it spread fast. So imagine if we are united for fighting the problems that the world encounters in a massive scale from time to time, which still remains to be a daydream and also an utopian thinking. This shows that when we fight, we come together, but this is in a passing phase of the power game and hegemonization. It is a word I am coining myself. Having said this, I would like to take you I would like to highlight how we can realize some of the solutions from our philosophical past, especially from Indian tradition, of which I have little acquaintance. I propose that the understanding of Rita, it is a very beautiful concept, you know. A lot of thinking has gone into the universal order, which makes the man a world citizen. That Rita, you know, looking at the universal order, man, you know, the supremacy, the primacy of the man and the primacy of the earth has not been thought out properly, as it has been thought out by the Vedic seers in the conception of Rita, which was propounded by the Vedic seers in a way we can understand the ideal of family as far as earth is concerned. This has given rise to the dharma and satya that have ethical implications of the concept. With these friends, having said that the concept of earth is central, I would like to bring before you a quotation, which was I quote from which was published in New York Times, which goes thus. You know, friends, why such a problem? What is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam? Why I want to speak about this is, Ravi, how much time I have? Ravi? Hello?
10 minutes.
Okay,
10 minutes.
10 minutes. I want to bring you, I want to bring before you something what happened in, in a New York park. How the people, in the name of being modern, have engaged in themselves in activities which they are not supposed to, such immoral, unethical things. So I quote, you name one societal reason that would cause people to engage in a own-to-back operation, looking for victims. We are looking for victims. You know, the head coach, Mayor head coach said, throughout the week, sociologists obliged, proffering familiar theories about why many delinquents of this generation do not content themselves with stealing hubcaps and breaking windows. The experts argue that too many families are broken, too many schools and communities are crumbling, and too many drugs are available for children to acquire a sturdy sense of mercy and morality to guide their behavior. This is what I am quoting, how the poor children below 16 years misbehaved with a lady in a New York park, for which this was the comment given by the mayor. So why I am telling this is because of non-understanding of the ethics that has gone into our being in the name of morality, distancing ourselves from the earth, from the mother earth. You know, so Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam therefore is an ethical statement relating the man to the earth in particular and universe in general. Why earth is spoken here is, it is the earth that with which man interacts first, and it is genuine to speak about earth first before we speak about universe. That is what I spoke, Vishwa and Vasudha. If we take the world scenario into consideration, we see what all are happening. I have a list of things that has happened in the world in the recent years, and I don't want to go into that list. But as I told you, the world is going through troubled times, violence, hatred, failure of governance, policy making, everything has come together to make us go from somewhere to nowhere. You know, the future is bleak if it is not taken care of today. You know, with this, I would like to, say what Gandhi spoke. Gandhi said once. Gandhi once said that earth provides enough to satisfy every man's need, but not every man's greed. Man has acted as a parasite on his environment, exploiting the natural resources, and taking what he wants with regard to the welfare of the system. Which is welfare of the system? System, please see, Rita. I am talking about the system that is Vasudha, which is standing with the principal ethics of Rita, which is the host, the biosphere, that is life, a life support system, over exploitation and of the natural resources without maintaining a proper ecological balance, and introduction of a pollution pressure on the environment without expending energy pump out disorder is the primary human activities that will eventually destroy man's ecological home. We are cutting the root of the branch on which we are sitting. That is what is happening. And Vasudha is actually a great, so to say, threat. So, in other words, pollution can be redefined as a conflict between man and the environment. That's what Gandhi said. I am translating it as Vasudha. Friends, I wanted to tell you one thing here. What Gandhi says, to give the commentary to Gandhi, give a footnote to what Gandhi said, that man is living like we want to. It is not enough to satisfy one's need, but it is like we are after the satisfying our luxuries. The necessity, the luxury has taken the form of necessity. That what is necessary is given up, and what is not necessary is being invoked as a way of living. Friends, I give you an example of this eco-balance, the earth, in the symbolism of a mother. In the symbolism of a mother, a mother has milk for the baby much before the baby arrives in the earth. And what the modern man has done is not only to drink the milk, but he has almost eaten the flesh from the breast of the mother. That is where we are, and therefore that man maintain and develop an aggressive territorialism that will prevent of his. And Schumacher in his book Small Beautiful wrote that how that overtaken the conflict and ecology and the world and economy and value must be avoided and reduced. There is a direct relationship between man and his environment. It is time that man himself. In Indian context, I would talk about there is not much time. I am not going through that portion. The idea of the world and the man in the world has been discussed elaborately in almost all the philosophical schools. Separation of spirit from matter, as enunciated by Descartes, clearly distinguishes two domains. One, a free-thinking man; the other, the matter, which is subject to causal necessity. This is resulted in a tension between freedom and determinism, a philosophical idealism and scientific materialism, which constitute the core of the crisis of the Enlightenment. The other problem arises from Cartesian dualism, the claim that human beings who are rational and therefore free are superior to the physical world. Please remember, and they must be the master and possessor of the nature. This is where we have, we have to relook at the way we have looked at the earth. So the selfishness of man and his aggressive misuse of the terrestrial resources are the chief causes of the total ecological predicament. How the ethical statement that Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam has been given a go by is seen from the beginning of the scientific revolution, and with the philosophy of Descartes and all others. So now, friends, this problem, I would like to speak for another 5 minutes, giving you some tips, some thoughts that Indians have done on this particular idea. The Vedic rishis saw harmonious movement everywhere. There's a constant changes within the harmony of nature, and this they interpreted as the law and order of the universe called Rita. It is the interaction of the matter and energy that originated life and maintained it. So this is being spoken in all the schools. In Samkhya model, I have 3 models: Samkhya, Sankara, and Ramanuja model of looking at the Vasudha. How you look at it from your perspective, and with the primacy of the matter and with the primacy of the spirit. So I don't want to go into the problems that are being invoked in the traditional Indian philosophy. I would like to bring before you that how we can invoke a kutumba in Vasudha. Bring like as I told you, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is an ethical statement. To look at the other as yourself, and this can the best happen. When we talk about this, can only take place when we talk yourself from we talk about this from one's own self. So the whole question is that the ethical issues in India are not separated from the issues concerning the self. That is what I want to say. So this is what is happening in the statement, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that how the discourse on the self, the issue concerning the self and issue concerning the nature go together. It is from the standpoint of the person that the whole universe is perceived. So the symbolism of the body stands as for the nature, and the embodied is the one who enjoys, maintains, and manages the body. Body is material and as such subject to matter energy spectra. We can make use of our body that much by which we can sustain in it, but not to that level which will make us enjoy our embodied state, not getting into disease and state of disembodiment. That is what I am putting somebody. I don't want to get into that topic at present. Ecology, in other words, is the study of the interrelation among the individuals of one and the same species and of different species among themselves and with their environment. Please, I would like to highlight, Vasudha does not mean the man. That is where the problem has occurred. We have started to with the modern medicines, man can live for 200 years. That will not solve the problem. It is whether it is a right type of living or not. Whether it is going with the ecological. So now that the environment is spoken at every place, every institution. Especially IITs talk a lot about environment. But what type of when it is a discourse which is not happening, grounding at all. We are far away from the primacy. That is not being so. This aspect has to be kept in mind, and man should learn to live with the other creation at the same time, like flora and fauna, and not take them as at ransom, as is the case today. So, friends, I would like to take another 2-3 minutes to complete what I wanted to say. Alvin Toffler, in one of his books called Education in the Future Tense, clearly discusses the strategy of future education. The options in choice of work have been considered as one of the most significant contributions of Indian thought and tradition to the new educational system. As I told you, in a country like India, in a time we have globalization, which has added newer predicaments to the already existing ones, the influence of the bigger forces and the advent of the new information technology has made the problem, larger. In a country having huge population and population growth, one has to examine what food is going to be reaped by the exercise that we are all in, distancing oneself from practice and precepts. That is what is happening all world over. And in that distancing only you can locate this ideal of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. It is just a slogan. It is beyond practice, unless, as I told you, when there is a war against a unknown force like pandemic. So how all that has happened today is that the rich nations have never bothered to think of the earth as a whole. What has happened, rather segmented themselves from the rest by creating worlds within the world. That is what Vividha is telling. First world, second world, third world. It is not comfortable. The garbage dumping of the US and Argentina is a bright addition. Similar is the case with the heads of India, Burma, Malaysia, Brazilian green forests have been destroyed. All that you know, I don't have to tell you. The common sense with which has been nurtured for ages in India, which is a reason for such long growth, which we have adopted, and there is no way that we can look back. Optimistically, Gandhiji thought that the sum total of mankind is not going to bring us down, but to lift us up. This was a great optimistic person, and this is not being felt in today's world. It is usually rejected nation as visualize this bad impacts in Indian context. And to quote a person, Professor Suresh, why did Gandhi heavy industry? Gandhi did not reject machine and industry. Had he rejected machine and industry, then he would not have prohibited the development of cottage industry and handicraft. He wished the machines to reach each and every house of an Indian village. This is what Professor Suresh Chandra spoke, that he told that we need cottage industries, an industry which everybody can use, not heavy industries, not the concretization, not the heavy usage of the resources which makes us poor in the name of making ourselves rich. So this is my conclusion, friends, that Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam will be an ideal, is an ethical statement. It can be practiced when which is a far-fetched concept, but at least it is high time that we should nurture this, especially in the age of globalization, when there is an attempt for making our lives more comfortable with the things available around us. And in this, as I told you, I have taken two models. One is Samkhya model of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, and Ramanuja's Vishishtadvaita model as another model for Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, how Ramanuja thinks in an organismic manner that Vasudha is one. It is the profundity, the sacredness of the Vasudha, and then think of it as the God and yourself as a part of it, by which you can achieve metaphysically, ontologically, and epistemologically what all the humankind is supposed to achieve. Thank you all for giving me this this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your excellent talk, Professor. We enjoyed and gathered a lot of information. Now I invite Professor Srikala M. Nair, Department of Philosophy, Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit, Palkalai, former Professor, Nalanda University, Joint Secretary, Indian Philosophical Congress.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Ravi, for this invite and great opportunity to have met my good old friends, Professor Paneerselvam, Professor Mishraji, Lourdes after a long time, Ravi himself. Wonderful to have seen all of you. This period, I learned that it is an ICPR periodical lecture, and therefore I have chosen something. Periodical lectures are meant, Professor Mishra knows, that they have been constituted for the benefit of the student community, particularly those who belong to the master's program. So have chosen something which is technical, which is useful for the student community, namely theories of truth in knowledge. Friends, this morning I shall share some of my thoughts on truth and knowledge and their interrelation. What I would like to focus more would be the interrelation between these theories, the theories of truth and knowledge. Any serious inquiry conducted in philosophy would end up or can be reduced to inquiries on either truth or knowledge. For the former deals with the nature of reality, that is the truth, and the latter with the episteme, the knowing part of it. In other words, the former discusses what is, and the latter discusses what can be known. That is, of course, one deals about the episteme and the other deals about the onta. Of course, there were attempts to reduce one into the other. Remember the anti-realist movements of Clement. Again, the order in which they are addressed, what has to precede what, are addressed may change as per your convictions. You know, at times you may place epistemology ahead of metaphysics, and if you are an Indian, well, standardly you think that you place metaphysics. Well, I'll come to that shortly. In the West, epistemological concerns necessarily takes a precedence over the metaphysical, while in India, they seem actually parallel exercises, though often Indologists, since the time of Indologists, we have been accused that we take, metaphysical presuppositions, but that is not the case. They have been conceived as one single science. I'll just tell you how. Bina Gupta in her Chit Shakti, I think the work is called Chit Shakti, speaks about this unique stages of knowing and being, or the parallel stages of knowing and being in Advaita, by providing a reading to the famous Advaita dictum Brahmavid Brahmaiva Bhavati. You all are familiar with the common reading Brahmavideva Brahmo Bhavidam Shakti. That is the common reading wherein epistemology takes a precedence over the metaphysical. But she points out an alternate reading of it. Only by experiencing Brahman, you can know its nature. In other words, the alternate reading would be Brahmanubhaveneva Brahmajnanam Libhyadetiva. That is an alternate parallel reading. This suggests that both episteme and onta have been rolled up, as it were, into one single science. They seem parallel activities. Well, I shan't speak anything on Indian philosophy. Professor Mishra has spoken a good deal of Indian philosophy. This morning, I should speak this afternoon, though I was supposed to speak in the morning. My concerns will be confined to the theories of truth and knowledge that have emerged in the Anglo-Saxon tradition, and I shan't step out of this tradition even for a single moment. Again, the order would be one usually followed in the West, from episteme as one basic human predicament, inescapable and primordial, to the ways of realizing it. How do you realize this basic human predicament, wherein truth comes in as a major game changer? Now, the trajectory of the paper would be something like this. First, to look at the tripartite conditions of knowledge, which speaks about the basic human predicament and how to realize it, commencing with belief, and then to look for ways that help us rationalize them. Friends, you all would have heard about the normative knowledge conditions, namely JTB condition, which speaks about truth, belief, and justification condition. Now, this is the norm. Like, I will not follow that order. I will be rather following the way we actually materialize, so the procedural undertaking initiated by the human being to accumulate knowledge. And therefore, I start with belief and then proceed on to the attestation of belief through rational means, that is justification, and then speak about the stipulative condition, namely truth, which we dream, hope, and pray to attain. So let me begin by exploring the standard analysis of knowledge. The basic question, what is knowledge, has been standardly answered by a tripartite definition. This is, I don't want to get into the detail. Probably, I do not know whether the Madurai Kamaraj University syllabus carries all this, but then ideally it has been recommended that, you know, this trajectory of knowledge analysis should be part and parcel of the syllabus. And I presume that the syllabus has been revised to that modality. So this JTB condition says, yes, knows that P, if and only if. You know what if and only if means. It speaks about a set of necessary and sufficient conditions. And what is this necessary and sufficient condition? The first condition is P, that P is true. And second, yes, believes that P. Who is the yes? Yes is the agent, the cognitive agent. Yes, believes this P. And third, yes, is justified in believing that P. I wish to slightly change the order. As I have said earlier, I would start from believing and then move on to justification and then speak finally about the truth. The whole process of knowing commences when the subjective cognitive faculties are being stimulated by the world as perceived by the agent. The whole process makes it kickstart when your subjective cognitive faculties get stimulated, being presented with something. Now here, what the world consists of is something very significant. Here by the world, one may mean the objects as believed by, if you are a realist, then you have the objects that exist independently. And if you are a representationalist, then you will have something that represents the object. And if you are again a phenomenalist, then there is something that stimulates your cognitive apparatus. And if you are an idealist, and again there are varieties of idealism, of absolute, objective, and subjective idealists, then you conceive or consider world in a different fashion. So once you have this belief or the idea, as Hume would call it, then the ball is set in motion. So you have the knowing process having had a kickstart, as it were. Now, subscribing to the behaviorist psychology. Now, what is, after all, this belief? Well, in Indian philosophy, we don't speak about belief, for instance. So, very quickly, let me represent what belief is. Subscribing to the behavioral psychology. Remember, during the late 19th and early 20th century, behavioral psychology was coming up. So the contemporary epistemologists too prefer to conceive belief as dispositional against the standard or current notion. What is the dispositional notion of belief? Where belief has been considered as something enduring, a long-standing belief to which the agent gets ready to commit himself. So you have an enduring belief and you are going ahead to have a rational attestation of this belief by taking or absorbing any one of the theories of justification. So once you have this subjective preference of seeing the world, as I see this as a steel mug, then I have adopted a subjective preference of seeing the world in a particular fashion. Then your task would be to attain objective proof for the same. Thus we have come to what is called justification, that is ratification of our beliefs, where our beliefs are attested using the standard rational norms. Now the question how your belief is being justified has been answered differently by different people. While some have thought of providing a linear type of justification from bottom to the top, as in the case of a pyramid, it's called the pyramid model. The others have thought of justifying beliefs by conceiving intertwined relation that exists between the doxas or the belief, as in the case of a raft. You remember the famous paper written by Ernest Sosa, The Raft and the pyramid. So one represents the foundationalist model and the other represents the coherentist model. The raft is the coherentist model and the pyramid form is the foundationalist model. So other than these two, there were also other attempts to provide justificatory theories, like for instance, contextualism. Now let me begin by exploring the pyramidic form of justification, where justification has been conceived in a linear form, as in a building, starting from the foundation. You focus on the foundation, you focus on strengthening the foundation, and then you raise the superstructures one after the other, one after the other. Now, this theory is, as you know, been popularly named as foundationalism. Now, there are two types of justification spoken in foundationalism. One is the immediate justification and the other is inferential justification. Now, immediate justification is one where your beliefs are justified directly without the help of any conceptual apparatus or without the mediation of our conceptual apparatus. Now, for instance, our immediate sense perceptions, that I see a steel mug in front of me, is an immediately justified entity for which I don't have to resort to any inference. But mind you, majority of our knowledge seeking happens through inferential justification. It is not coming through immediate justification. And what is unique about foundationalism is that all these inferential justification gets invariably terminated at this immediately justified beliefs, which are otherwise called as basic beliefs or foundational beliefs, which are presumed to be incorrigible and self-justified. And either they have to be self-justified or they'll have to be justified by other basic beliefs. So they hold a very unique status. However, this strong or radical variety of foundationalism was soon diluted, giving rise to a moderate version of it, primarily because we cannot surely run with this type of incorrigible beliefs and the inferential justification chain getting terminated, every inferential justification chain getting terminated invariably at the immediate belief. That is not possible, and if you insist on this, then our knowledge, the scope of our knowledge will be extremely limited. And also, philosophers from different domains demanded that this would be narrowing down the human possibilities of human knowledge, and therefore they wanted to, like Alvin Plantinga have argued from religious epistemology, has argued that let religious propositions also be considered as basic propositions. There were several such moves. And now, foundationalism, by and large, though was largely subscribed and was the favorite theory for analysts for a long time since Descartes, there were several anti-foundationalist movements, particularly during the latter part of the bygone century, 20th century. In fact, all those postmodern attempts, Professor Paneerselvam was making a travelogue through several philosophers, almost all of them. If you ask me what is common to all these postmodern moves or schools, I would say that the single thing that is common to all these postmodern schools of philosophy is that they are all anti-foundationalists. Well, now the basic drawback of foundationalism, according to all these postmodern moves, is that it failed to accommodate varieties of knowledge that demanded varied justificatory models, as in the case of ethics, as in the case of religious experience. They're all part and parcel of our human experience, and then we need to have them. We cannot just abandon them because they are not being objectified or they do not get terminated in immediately justified beliefs. And the second major objection is its apparent objectification of our knowledge propositions. Now, when we move from this pyramid form to the raft form, that is the coherent form, we are more at ease, primarily because we all feel intuitively, at least, that most of our beliefs are justified when they are found in coherence with the rest of our beliefs. You just sit back, forget about all these theories, you relax, sit back, and then think how you justify your basic doxas or basic convictions, and then immediately you will know that you are applying the coherentist model. You are just trying to see whether they cohere with the rest of the doxas, with the beliefs within your system. But there are several issues that coherentists will have to answer. The edifice of justification stands here because of the way in which the parts fit together and delicately support each other, forming a system by itself. Now, what is this required sense of coherence? Now, they cannot just loosely speak about, consistency, coherency, so on and so forth. They will have to differ. But people largely differ on this. There are idealist coherence. I mean, traditionally, it was the idealist school who have subscribed to coherentism, but there are also a majority of large number of analysts now subscribe to coherentism. Coherentism is in fashion. So it's the case with contextualism. Foundationalism has been discarded in toto. Now the idealists, the traditional defenders of coherence theory, conceived of the relationship of coherence as a necessary connection or entailment. Read Brand Blanchard. When I was in Madras University, Professor Balasubramanian has insisted that I should read The Nature of Thought by Brand Blanchard, and I think that it is great luck that I initiated my research reading Brand Blanchard, wherein he speaks about this entailment. He distinguishes between logical entailment, empirical entailment, empirical necessity, logical necessity, so on and so forth. An alternate account of coherence. And now what I have presented is the standard coherence theory of justification. Now, let me familiarize you to an alternate account of coherence forwarded by Wilfred Sellars and Keith Lehrer, called explanatory coherence theory, which holds that each belief is to be evaluated by appeal to the role it plays in the belief system. Friends, all of us have what is called a doxastic system, a belief system, and every newly approaching belief should be cross-examined by fixing it in the existing doxastic system. And if that belief set functions better with the addition of the new recruit, then that belief is justified in terms of thus explanatory coherence theory. So if the set is more coherent with this belief as a member rather than with any alternative, the belief is justified. An explication of maximal explanatory coherence is very, very significant for this theory. What is this? A system C has a maximum of explanatory coherence. Well, you can think about alternate belief systems and think, how do you choose a belief system, a particular belief system? Say C. I'm using the variable C for that. C has maximum explanatory coherence among the system of beliefs understood by us if and only if there are three conditions placed. First, C is among the system of beliefs understood by us, and C is consistent. And third, for any other alternate system C dash, or you combine C and C dash, explain the same things, but some things are explained better by C than C dash. And therefore, you will have to choose C as the system which is maximum explanatory. But MAC has one defect. See, after all, we are all human beings. So we will have our favorite system, out of personal choice. And what we do, what we try to do was, we think that it's maximally coherent by decreasing what should be explained. There should be certain things which are unexplained. So what we try to do is we try to push it to the background. We try to ignore it. Now, this leads Lehrer to propose an alternate version of coherentism called subjective coherentism. Now, friends, this is very, very significant because, see, as an epistemically responsible agent, we will have to keep examining our doxastic system and see whether there exists any doxa, any belief which is unexamined. That is why he speaks about what is called subjective coherentism, wherein he speaks about the corrected doxastic system. Here it is not a person's doxastic system that is relevant to justification, but rather his corrected doxastic system. So now, how do you arrive at this corrected doxastic system? The doxastic system that is resulting when every statement is deleted, which he would cease to believe as an impartial and disinterested truth seeker. As human beings, all of us would like to believe several things which are irrational. But as a responsible epistemic agent, you need to attend on your doxastic system and keep working on it, and should follow only what is called the corrected doxastic system. So when we come to the contextual solutions, now I leave behind coherentism because it is, I'm just quickly traveling. When we come to the contextual solution to the rigorous problem, things are much simplified, and contextualism again in fashion for the youngsters, anybody who wants to do research. Well, contextualism is something which has been suggested. Particularly, you can also work on contextualism in the Indian context, though I do not have time for that. So, according to this contextualist, a belief can be justified in a particular context. And here, the truth of some prepositions can be taken for granted without seeking evidences. So these prepositions, though themselves unjustified, they have just been absorbed axiomatically. They can be used to provide inferential justification for other prepositions. You know what inferential justification is. P implies Q, Q implies R. So R can be reduced to S. As we move behind, R gets reduced to S, S reduced to P. And then where do you reduce P? P has to be something which is self-justified or axiomatic or has been adopted in a contextual situation without any further evidence. Now, contextualists here clarify that the foundations of justification are those beliefs that a certain community of believers take for granted without any reasons. But they do not have a perspective. There are several questions that this contextualists will have to answer or specify. Who the relevant fellow believers are. See, when we are speaking about religious community, whom you insist has to be the constituting the community. What is the minimum number of belief to be justified? And these are part as awareness of the consensus of his believer. How will I know that there is consensus that is coming forth from the fellow believers? All these are left unclear. It is our conviction that if beliefs are rationally justified, then we have succeeded in bringing truth along. So in the GTB analysis, we started from belief and then we moved on to attesting our personal beliefs by employing rational theories of justification. And if we do these two, then it is proposed or it's hoped and we presume that we bring truth to our fold. And this is how truth becomes a condition of our knowledge. If I know, for instance, the sentence, the atom has been split, then the sentence, the atom has been split, has to be true. What is it for a sentence to be true? This has been famously answered by the classical traditional theories, namely correspondence, coherence, and pragmatic theories. I'll just expose the crucial factors in these three because this is very famous and well known to everybody. Now, the famous and most commonsensical answer comes from correspondence, as you all know. And of course, this correspondence theories would make a bit sophisticated. Their answer comes out in a sophisticated fashion. Now, if you want to look at the correspondence, what is correspondence? Correspondence states that a statement is true if the statement corresponds to the facts. As per the correspondence theory, the propositional content of my subjective state of mind describes the world in a particular way. When I see that the cat is on the mat, then I presume that my belief that the cat is on the mat has been represented by the world. And for this description to be true is for the world independent of my cognitive activity to fit that description. Only if there is this correspondence between my belief or my cognitive stimulation and the world as such, then there occurs what is called the correspondence theory of truth. Now, explicating the intuition of correspondence lies in delineating three factors: the truth, bearers, truth donors, and the relation of correspondence. Quickly, I'll run through these. Truth bearers are what bears the truth, and there are several factors that has been considered for it. Basically, a truth bearer has to be a linguistic unity, and therefore primarily beliefs, because intuitively we believe that it is our beliefs that have to be truth bearers, but beliefs cannot be. I will not go to the detailed beliefs, statements, sentences, prepositions, all have been considered, but prepositions have been finally chosen for the following reasons. First, since beliefs can be communicated, they must be having some objective interpersonal content, and that is prepositions. Again, if a single sentence can be translated into different languages, also can be formulated in different forms within the same language, there must be something called the content of the sentence, and we know that it is statements. And one single statement can be uttered at different occasions, either by the same person or by the different persons, and becomes different statements. And therefore, there should be something called the basic truth value or the content of the statement. And that takes us to what is called prepositions. So if truth is believed to be a property independent of human minds, truth bearers also must exist independent of human minds. Now coming to the next item, truth donor. What is it that donates truth? Now, that it has to be something that exists in the world. But, you cannot speak about this concrete objects as such that exist in the world. It has to be the logical representation of the concrete objects. And we often speak about facts. But generally, philosophers have tough time defining what facts are. It's a famous debate that ran between Austin and Strawson while defining facts. While Austin has tried to define facts as events, but Strawson has said that no, events cannot be facts for two reasons. Primarily, events have spatio-temporal specification, and second, events are incapable of logical relations. They can have only causal relation, and therefore, events cannot be what is called facts. And so the ball is now in Strawson's court, but Strawson is in no better position. So instead of giving a proper definition to facts, Strawson said, look, facts are like what names are for objects. Now, what is the relation between an object and its name? A name is not the object. See, my name is Shrikala, but Shrikala is not this person, right? It is only the name. See, if you want to, if you're angry with me, you cannot just write my name and then cheer it or hit it. It doesn't mean anything to me, right? So, a name and object has a very mysterious relation. So is the relation between the fact and the world, or the world as it's been represented according to Strawson. And this definition doesn't help us much. Now, the basic problem that we have in defining what fact is that, our difficulty in defining facts arises since what is to count as a fact depends on how we come to conceptualize the world. The way we conceptualize the world already presupposes how we look at the facts. And this has been presupposed in our seeing it in this way. We cannot get completely behind this conceptual ordering. As we start speaking about or philosophizing it, it has already been presupposed that you cannot take, a total get back from our conceptual ordering. In short, to say that a statement is true if and only if it corresponds to fact is to say no more than it is true if and only if it satisfies the appropriate conditions of truth. And friends, we haven't said anything new. So this is the trouble with the analytic tradition. The last among the key issues related to correspondence is how exactly does the true proposition corresponds. What is the so-called correspondence? The famous attempts are the isomorphic representation between preposition and the non-prepositional reality, and one-to-one correspondence, often been talked as mirroring, which is in vogue since Wittgenstein. And but Austin, voting against Wittgensteinian picture theory, he says that the picture theory asserts that the nature of correspondence involved is purely, he says that it is purely conventional and the picturing need not come at all here. So what happens on one side, you have the positivists who have failed to give an account of the world-world relation in terms of our linguistic convention. We see the positivists have given up totally our linguistic convention, and on the other, you have Austin who has totally committed to the linguistic convention, ignoring the world as such. So we have an impasse. Now, to transcend this, a few philosophers have opted to what is called correspondence to instead of correspondence with. But then again, we are in darkness as to what is this unique notion of correspondence to. But they say that we escape the mirroring, the problematic mirroring notion. Now, a quick evaluation of correspondence reveals that things are not all that good, because varieties of prepositions are left out. True prepositions about unrealized situations, normative considerations, mathematical, logical, all these have been left out, and therefore coherentists have pointed out that the basic problem with correspondence is that we have no knowledge of reality. We have no way to get to the reality as such. All that we have is the conceptualized version. When I say that this is a steel mug, I'm not talking about the steel mug as such which exists in the external world. I'm talking about the conceptualized version, the steel mug as I understand. So in total, what happens is that on one side you have preposition, which is of course yes, and the other is also again yes, because that for conceptualizing the world, our intellect is at least partly responsible. So both these seem to be subjective and private, linguistically confined, so on and so forth. And therefore, coherentists would say that, look, friends, there is no there's no world-word relation, nothing of that sort. There is always consistency that we can speak about between prepositions. Between both the prepositions and the facts are linguistic, private, subjective. So speak about their consistency. That is all that you can do. And thus you have the coherence theory of truth. So I'm introducing to you both coherence theory as a justification, it's a theory of truth. And I'll also tell you that coherence theory is basically a theory of epistemology. It's not a theory of truth. Now, coherentists have a standard notion that you should have coherence between existing prepositions. But what has to be the nature? There, people differ. And the basic intuition is that the impossibility of getting outside language or thought, which is the single meritorious point of coherentism. And the outcome of the theory, which has been largely used in science these days, that absolute truth is an impossibility. You cannot grasp the absolute truth. All that you can achieve or hope to achieve is only partial or relative truth. You know that probability theories are in vogue these days. So the higher degree of truth we will hope to achieve, the more you comprehend the system as such. You know, it is like, I always use this analogy. When prime ministers try to see the flood situation, what they do, they fly by the helicopter, so that they will have a panoramic. The higher you climb in terms of the reality, the better you will have the vision of what is happening, the comprehensive vision of reality. So you need to climb higher. Hegel speaks about it, Sri Aurobindo speaks about it. So you need to climb higher at the levels of reality so that you can have a comprehensive vision of reality. But grant that all such talks are metaphorical. But friends, clear statements of this theory is hard to find. Now, there are basic difficulties with the coherence, primarily because it is secular, because when you speak about coherence, you are already presupposing truth, because you have to have a basic consistent system with which the French system can cohere. And how do you constitute this coherent system? Two prepositions are coherent or consistent only if one is true and the other is not false, right? And here you are already presupposing truth and falsity and what you are going to define. So the argument seems to be secular. And moreover, consistency, though necessary for coherence, is not sufficient. But what else is required is left unclear. Yet another objection is the possibility of parallel systems. See, you have parallel metaphysical systems. So is the case with, parallel scientific models with paradigm shifts. You have the Newtonian model, you have the Einsteinian model, you have the quantum mechanics model. So parallel systems of reality has been in vogue. So also, often, the examples often chosen by coherentists all come from the a priori sciences, mathematics, logic, and so. But remember, our knowledge seeking is always from the a posteriori. Majority of our knowledge consists of knowledge about the world, which is contingent, which is not a priori. And therefore, we cannot resort to this coherence theory by and large. The third theory is pragmatic. How much of time can I take? I suppose, well, I'll try to be quick. The third theory is pragmatic theory, which equates truth with true if it works in praxis. Now, what is working in praxis is, something which is very difficult to define. For instance, if the meaning of God exists is equated with practical difference the belief in God makes to a believer's life, then that proposition is true for that person, true for the believer. You don't have to worry whether it has an universal or objective validity. That is, you don't have to universalize it at all. To explicate the theory, they use the notion of an idea. A true idea is one which works. For instance, the function of ideas in pure mathematics is to avoid frustration and contradiction, in science to make predictions and suggestions for investigation, and in religion to give satisfaction to the believer. If you are a non-believer, don't worry about it. So pragmatists, of course, the problem with pragmatists, pragmatic theory has been in vogue. It's been largely used by cognitive science, so on and so forth. I don't have time to speak about it. It's a wonderful theory, but their mistake lies in twofold. The first is they have ignored the distinction between accepting something and accepting something as true. They are two different things. And again, the distinction between something being accepted as true and something being true. Something can be true even without you accepting it, right? That is what truth is. So truth is something which is objective par excellence, and the pragmatists have reduced it to a subjective matter. Now, all these classical theories have committed this common blunder of mixing theory of truth with verification theories. And therefore, the modern theories, like the logical superfluity theory, performative theory, the semantic theory, and the minimal correspondence, all of them have come up with alternate models of defining theory. For instance, the logical superfluity theory would say that there is really no separate problem of truth, but merely a linguistic model. The theory says that it is true that P, it's a fact that P are all logically equivalent. So therefore, when you can just finish with saying P, why do you say it is true that P? By saying it is true that the locution only weighs more breath and more ink. If you write it, it is more ink. If you speak, it is more breath. It's just waste because it is redundant logically. This is what is called logical redundancy or logical superfluity theory. In fact, their use, of course, has this purpose that, it's like saying, will you come tomorrow? I can say, yes. I can also say, certainly I'll come. By certainly, I'm not saying anything more than that. If my students know that by saying yes, I mean with all seriousness that I will be at the university, I don't have to say certainly I'll come. It is a waste of language, right? So it is like saying certainly, really, assuredly, which can be eliminated. It's kind of an emphatic assertion. So therefore, what seems required is adding a performative value of these words. So truth assertions seem to have some performative functions. Here, Strawson says that they have certain performative functions. His theory is called performative theory. He says true and false are not predicates of anything. They are not saying anything. They are not predicates. See, what is a predicate? When it says Rose is beautiful, the is beautiful is the predicate which speaks something about the rose, something new about the rose. But when I say P, and instead I say P is true is not saying anything about P, and therefore it's not really a predicate, but it has one function. What is that function? They are devices for the expression of agreement or disagreement. When I say it is true, I also say that I agree with P. So this kind of performative function should be considered according to Strauss. But again, there are several problems, like this performative function is something unique in English for one, and second, in virtue of what is it that you are agreeing with P? Once again, you will have to say I agree because it is true. So it is circular. And third, even if we agree with Strawson on performative aspect, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have a descriptive role. So descriptive and performative are not disjunctive. They can both be in conjunction. A proposition can be performative as well as descriptive. And finally, certain prepositions, certain linguistic usages like hypothetical disjunctive statements cannot have performative functions. Yet another modern version attempted is by Alfred Tarskiff, the very famous semantic theory, where he initiates by addressing the famous truth paradox available in Greek philosophy. Epimenides the Cretan said that all Cretans are liars. Now he himself is a Cretan and he says all Cretans are liars. So what is the net result of it? If you credit truth to the preposition, we end up with falsity, and if you start with falsity, you will end up with truth, suggesting that the same preposition can have at the same time two truth values. Now this is the truth paradox. Now Tasker offers a solution. He says, by distinguishing between two levels of language. It's wonderful theory. When Karl Popper has all words of praise for this. I'll come to that quickly. When he says you can speak about two levels of language, object language and meta language. Object language is when I speak about the object of this world. When I speak about the mug, when I say that this is a steel mug, this is an object language. But when I move to, and he calls it L0. But when you move to the second level, what happens? The object is no more the concrete object, but the sentence. The sentence that I spoke about the steel mug was in English. So I have moved to a higher level. This is called meta language, where it is L1. So you can have any number of higher levels of language, but he insisted that truth is a meta-linguistic element. And the problem with truth is that in natural language, you confuse the objects with the higher semantic functions like truth, etc. See, names of statement describing facts, statement denoting predicates of or relations between fundamental kinds of expressions. All these are factors which only a meta language can possess. So when you confuse the object language with meta language, you have the problem. So truth has to be addressed only at the meta linguistic level. So he gives only a condition of adequacy. He says, I'm not defining truth. I'll just tell you the adequate condition under which you can meaningfully use the term truth. What is that condition of adequacy? X is true in L if and only if P. That is, the English statement, grass is green is an inverted comma. You can use a variable for that. Is true if and only if grass is green, which is outside the quotation. So inside the quotation, it's the name of the sentence. Outside the quotation, it represents the world, the factual world. So he says that semantically closed languages like the natural language cannot employ, they are unsuitable vehicles for a rigorous theory of truth, and therefore he has devised a formal language which is very, very intricate, mathematical in nature. Now I'll finish with introducing the last and the chosen theory of mind, that is minimal correspondence. What is useful about minimal correspondence is it has all the benefits of correspondence minus its difficulties, its lacunas. What is minimal correspondence? It initiates with book 4 of Aristotle's Metaphysics, wherein he says, in a simple definition of truth, to say of what is that is not, or what is not that it is false. While to say of what is that it is, and of what is not that it is not, is true. In recent times, John Mackey has defined this, and he says to say that a statement is true is to say that things are as they are stated by that statement. It is minimal because it retains the correspondence but does not use any notion of mirroring or picturing or any such difficulties. And he says it has all the virtues of Tarskian schema, but it is meritorious when compared to Tarskian schema because MC doesn't restrict truth bearers to sentences as Tarski does. And second, he gives the, that is MC, that's minimal correspondence, gives only an adequate condition. MC, that is schema of Tarski, gives only an adequate condition, while minimal correspondence gives a proper definition, like the traditional correspondence. And it accommodates all varieties of prepositions, varieties about the future situations, about normative considerations, mathematical, logical prepositions, so on and so forth. Now I'll wind up talking about what I wanted to speak crucially, that is the connection between justification and truth. A variety of philosophers since Descartes have proposed that there is a relation between justification and truth. They are conceptually related. That is, if you have justification for a preposition, you ought to have truth with you. Now, the strongest view regarding truth connection is our affirming that the connection is logical. That is, if I am justified in believing P, then P has to be true. There is a logical entailment between justification and truth. This is what Descartes has dreamt. And however, most contemporary philosophers have given up this Cartesian dream and have settled down for a fallibilist theory of justification. What is fallibilist theory? Fallibilist theory allows that when C makes P justified for yes, that is a set of evidences C makes P justified for yes, Shrikala. For instance, it is still possible that P is false because I am not an enlightened person, I am not an omniscient agency. So there could always be a crucial evidence that stays away from me, the arrival of which would have changed people. And therefore, there is this basic domestic fallibility inbuilt in human beings. Since we have no immediately and unproblematic access to truth, justification plays the role of a mediating link between subjective starting point and objective. It is like, you dream to reach to the other shore. This is always the human predicament. We want to reach truth by employing justification, but all that, Professor Matilal has beautifully said that it is like, sending an arrow. You send an arrow with all possibility, thinking that it would hit the mark. It may hit the mark, it may miss the mark. That is the fact, because we human beings are always fallible and our prepositions are always contingent in nature. All that we can say is that, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try. I'm not a skeptic. I don't subscribe to skepticism. All that we can say is that if our standards of epistemic justification are appropriately chosen, as I have said, keep your doxastic system under control, have corrected doxastic system, be a responsible epistemic agent. If you do all this, then it is hoped that our beliefs are epistemically justified and it will also fetch truth to you. Thank you all. Wonderful talking to you all. I also revisited my children. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. We gathered a lot of information. It was very nice. Now I invite Professor D. Krishnan, Chairperson and Head, Department of Political Science, Madurai Kamaraj University, Madurai. Now he is going to talk about values behind Indian Constitution. Kindly respond, Professor.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. Very good afternoon to everyone present here in this virtual platform. At the outset, I have to thank Dr. Ravikumar, the organizing secretary of this national level webinar sponsored by ICPR. And I'm very happy to be here with the eminent scholars of the field of philosophy. So I'm very much happy to be one of the speakers in this forum. I think I am the only person away from the department of the field of philosophy, but at the same time, I can say one thing, that if a country to be a successful country with a democratic ideology, it should have a clear understanding of political philosophy of that particular country. In this aspect, I selected the topic when the organizer came and talked to me. I told that talking about the values of Indian Constitution will be the best if I am talking in this particular forum. So dear friends, before I talk to this, I have to present my deliberation into two different aspects. One is how the Constitution was framed out. Next, how the values have been legalized and framed out in the Constitution of India. With this, because everyone, we know that the values are very much important for the life, to lead a life in a better manner. The same values, if the values are being organized, being legalized, it is very difficult to follow it. Because what I am going to say here is the values are being legalized and these have been included in the Constitution. So the values have more effect than what we are seeing in what we are witnessing in our common life. When we talk about the values in the Constitution, it is the constructive purpose for the use of power. When we talk about the man's or an individual's relationship with the state, the country, he will have more responsibility. If we talk about a democratic country, there are three basic ideologies in democracy: the liberty, equality, and fraternity. These are the major principles. That major principles should be followed. The major principles should be practiced without any issue. In this aspect, the government of, the independent, 1947, one act was announced by the British Parliament, that is Indian Independent Act. That act recognized the present Indian government, the then present Indian government, to formulate a constituent assembly to create their own constitution. It was organized, it was convened with the chairmanship of Dr. Rajendra Prasad. The Constituent Assembly started its work. It took 2 years, 11 months, and 18 days to complete it. But within 3 years, the Constitution was completely finished. But we should not think that within these 3 years, the Constitution was made. No, because the inclusion of that Constitution were the mutual accommodation, the compromises, the wide ranging of the consensus, and the aspirations of the aspirations which were generated from the freedom struggle, the constitutional changes by the United Kingdom, the British Parliament, and also the Kantian principles, then the social cultural ethos of our country, then the experiences of functioning of the democracies of the world. With this, we can say the Constitution was adapted. The Constitution was adapted November 26, 1949. But the Constitution came into effect January 26, 1950. Till 1925, January 25, 1950, India was following the Constitution of England, which is the Government of India Act 1935. So that was with little modification after the Indian independence. So till January 26, 1950, the Constitution was not by us, it was made by the British Parliament with some modifications. So only after 26th January 1950, India came into being with the independent Constitution. That time itself, there was two great questions, two great critics raised from the jurists, either within Indian subcontinent, and also from the Western countries. The two questions were whether Indian Constitution is original or the re-modification of the 1935 Act. See, my dear friends, within that 3 years, 2 years, 11 months, and 18 days, there were 160 sessions were made in the Constitution, the Parliament, to discuss about the Constitution, Indian Constitution. And also, Dr. Ambedkar himself, he answered more than 3,000 questions raised by the Parliament, the members of the Parliament. He clearly answered each and every questions, every word about the Indian Constitution. So we cannot say that the Constitution framed by the Constituent Assembly is copied from other countries. Ambedkar says, yes, we borrowed, but we are not completely borrowed. What are the provisions which are matching to our country has been incorporated with our Constitution. My dear friends, we should know about some of the things we can easily identify a culture of a particular ethnic group. We can easily identify the practice of particular religion. We can easily identify the culture of a particular people of the language people. But at the same time, it is very, very difficult to identify the nature of a multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-racial, multi-religious, and multi-language country. That is the country India is totally different from other countries' constitutions. So this is the major and specific difference from the constitutions of other countries. So we have different types of culture, different kinds of race, culture, religion, language, and region also. So India it's a rich diversities in many ways like this. So why the rich plurality of Indian society is actually due to her openness and the tradition of tolerance. This is a basic core of our constitutional values, we can say. So actually, as far as the Indian constitution is concerned, it is the fact that each and every citizen should know about each and every word of the preamble of the Indian constitution, because the preamble is the soul and heart of Indian constitution. This is the major important thing to be discussed. I can say that for every religion, we are having the holy book. As a citizen, everyone should know about our holy book, the constitution. But we people are always not aware on this particular area. Simply we are talking about politics, but we are not talking about how we are related with the country, because the constitution says how an individual is connected with the state. The constitution says how the government has a responsibility towards the individual. The constitution says what are the protection to be given to the individuals. The constitution guarantees the rights of the people, the freedom of the people, the equality of the people. But we are not at all minding the values of the constitution. So that the preamble says the total outcome or the core of Indian constitution. Actually, the Indian constitution, the preamble, it says that we the people of India, because each and every citizen should have or should frame the page of the preamble. Even the government has also says that the November 26th of every year should be considered as the National Constitution Day, because that preamble says what are the provisions, what are the values have been incorporated in the Constitution of India. It says, we the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure its citizens justice in social, economic, and political, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship, equality of status and opportunity, and to promote among them all, then fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual in the unity and integrity of the nation. In our Constituent Assembly, it has been written like that. In our Constituent Assembly, this 26th day of November 1949, do hereby adopt, enact, and give to ourselves to the Constitution. This is the preamble of Indian Constitution. My dear friends, just I read the preamble of Indian Constitution. See the words. So that previously I told that everyone should know each and every word coined by the constitutional fathers in the preamble of Indian Constitution. The first very word, we, means we, the people of India. We says about the people, the plural society, the diversity, unity in diversity. So we, the people of India, it clearly says the power is with the hands of the people. Actually, it is said that when we talk about the state, the nation, there are two types of country, nations. One is police state, another one is welfare state. The police state will give guarantee to the basic necessities, the food, cloth and shelter. But the welfare state will fulfill all the needs of the society, because only after the independent India, only after we became as an independent country with a republican setup, we were able to have our own constitution, we were able to constitute, we were able to execute ourselves with our representatives. So the preamble itself clearly says about the people's sovereignty. The power is not in the hands of the political leaders or the Chief Justice of India or the Prime Minister or the President. The power is in the hands of the people, each and every individual. So this is the value. This is the value, the we people, the we the people. And also again, it is telling that in our constituent assembly, see, wherever we read, it says about the pluralist, the importance of the pluralistic society and the power given to each and every citizen. Where we can see the democratic ideology means only in the democratic country we can see through the guarantees, the rights given by the constitution. So in our constitution, it clearly says that India is a sovereign country. The socialist means we can have, everyone should get everything. That was the basic principle of socialism. And also secular, democratic republic. See, before I come to this, I can also say that why India is following this type of the Government of Act 1935. K.M. Munshi, one of the prominent Constituent Assembly member, he rightly pointed out that we should not forget a very important fact that during the last 100 years, Indian public life has been largely drawn upon the tradition of British constitutional law. Most of us have looked up to the British model is the best. Last 40 years, it was said in 1950. Last 40 years, some kind of responsibility in governance introduced in the parliament, and also our constitutional tradition is the parliamentary form. So these two questions always mingling with each other. Why we followed this type of parliamentary form of government, and also how we are including the values in our constitution. My dear friends, why I am quoting this is this is the Department of Philosophy. Seeking the truth is the basic objective of the field. So simply we are talking about our constitution without knowing the hidden facts within the constitutional background. That is the reason I am talking about these type of things in this particular forum where the experts are here. And also I can say that apart from the sovereignty, you know that sovereignty is the highest power. The highest power is with the people. They are surrendering their power to their representatives. The representatives are becoming the executives. They use this power for the betterment of the people. This is the philosophy behind this type of values. And also, we can say that the supreme constitutional values here in this constitution, the supreme constitutional values are sovereignty, socialism, secularism, democracy, republicanism, justice, liberty, equality, fraternity, individual dignity, unity and integrity of the nation. See, socialism, the unity and integrity, and also the fraternity. These three were added in 1976 in our Indian Constitution. One thing we should remember that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the founding father of Indian Constitution, he said the fundamental rights are the basic of Indian Constitution. It is like an anchor of a ship. If anyone touch the fundamental rights of the Indian Constitution, the total structure of Indian Constitution will be collapsed. Such a way, these all values have been incorporated in three items. One is fundamental rights, another one is directive principles of state policy, followed by the fundamental duties. The fundamental rights gives full guarantee to the fundamental rights, are giving a full guarantee by the Constitution. And also the directive principles of state policy, they are the principles which should be followed by the state governments when they are framing the policies. In that principles, there are three kinds of principles should be added as per the Constitution is saying. That means the social principles, Gandhian principles, and the world peace principles. See, whenever a policy is being taken or being framed, these principles should be followed. The social principles, Gandhian principles, and also the world peace principles. The fraternity, the universalization, the world peace. These are all the basic principles to be followed by each and every policy making. So the Constitution gives more significance to the values here, because these are all the values through which the people can lead their life without any hurdles. So apart from the fundamental rights, the directive principles plays a vital role. Even for the directive, one of the important provisions of Indian Constitution is up to the age of 14, each and every children should be educated. The free and compulsory education. See, the free and compulsory education. Education is right, but it should be compulsory and it should be free. So these are all the important values being legalized. Then only the society be developed. Such a beautiful way the constitutional fathers have incorporated these particular values in the Constitution. Apart from that, the adult franchise, we can say equality, that is political equality, economic equality, cultural equality. Say for even when we talk about the religion, the constitutional makers, they have clearly mentioned about the secularism. According to our Constitution, we cannot say that this is our religion. All the religions should be given equal treatment. No religion can claim that our religion is high. Even in that Constitution, the constitutional framers have given another value to the minorities, the protection to the minorities. See how the values have been given each and every section of the society. And also the adult franchise. Up to the age of 18, if anyone attained the age of 18 is eligible to vote, is capable of selecting a person. So because of the adult franchise, before independence, all people were not given the voting right. All people were not giving voting right. Only there were some qualifications. Even at the time of 1935 Act, there were people, only the graduates and the people who are having the wealth of more than 1 lakh rupees per year will be able to vote for the members of the council in the state. But the constitution guarantees each and every citizen, if they are attained 18 years of age. This is the adult franchise. This is an important thing, how a person is being given vote. That's what Dr. Ambedkar said, one man, one vote, one vote, one value. Even he may be a big shot, he may be a president or anyone, or even he may be a beggar having a citizenship of India, is eligible to vote. Even he can contest also. So such a important privilege is given by the constitution on giving more value to the individuals. And also independent judiciary. This is another important feature of Indian constitution, having more values, because the judiciary is more powerful than any other organizations of the state. There are 3 organs of the state: the legislature, executive, and judiciary. The judiciary is more powerful than 2 others, because the judiciary is, the Supreme Court is the guardian of the Indian constitution. The judiciary is independent and is highly supremacy. It is having the power of supremacy, so that all there is a particular constitutional provision that the constitutional remedies, the fundamental rights, there are certain rights which are saying about the constitutional remedies if any individual is affected by the violation of rights. Through these particular writs, through the particular provisions, the individual can raise its right, and he can get back through the constitutional provisions given by the constitution. So here we can identify the justice, the liberty, the equality, social justice, political justice, economic justice. Everything can be get back through the constitutional provisions given by the fundamental rights in the constitution. So these are important features with values, and also the single citizenship provisions. These are all the important things we should know about the constitutional provisions. But I want to quote one wording said by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. The political equality was not possible unless men were made equal to the social and economic plane as well. The right to vote for the hungry and illiterate person without clothing and shelter meant little. The same thing, Jawaharlal Nehru, he talked about the Constituent Assembly, that because these are all the values, these are all the core things which has been incorporated while the Constituent Assembly created the Indian Constitution. He said, Jawaharlal Nehru said that to free India through a new constitution, to feed the starving people, and to clothe the naked masses and to give every Indian the fullest opportunity to develop himself according to his capacity. The Constitution, thus seen as a relevant instrument of the social change. So the poor and the starving was merely a paper constitution. If the people are not given these privileges, the constitution will be a paper constitution, the useless and the purposeless. So this is an important thing. And also I want to make one more quote given by Dr. Rajendra Prasad at the time of the adoption of Indian Constitution, the importance of the Constitution. He said, if the people who are elected are capable and men are character and integrity, if the people who are elected are capable and men are character and integrity, they would be able to make the best even of a defective constitution. If they are lacking in this, the constitution cannot help the country. India needs today nothing more than a set of honest men who will have the interest of the country before them. This is the word given by Dr. Rajendra Prasad when they submitted the constitution in the Indian Parliament on 26th November 1949. With this I conclude. Thanks for giving this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Now it is the time for discussion. Only 5 minutes. Participants may raise the questions one by one.
How would you correlate the phenomenology of language, that is the relationship between the language users and the world? Number one. The second question is, whatever you have spoken or presented here regarding phenomenology of language, does it apply to ancient philosophy or medieval philosophy or modern philosophy or contemporary philosophy or continental philosophy? Kindly explain, sir. The structural semiotics, hermeneutics, existentialism, and deconstruction and cultural theory. Language is not studied as a separate discipline. Many other areas of the thought. What is the connection between mind and language? This is what I would like to, get it clarified from Professor Panneerselvam, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Srinivasan, for your interesting questions. 3 questions you have asked. The first one is the connection or relation between language users and the world. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Language users and the world. Language user, who are the language users? We are all using language. In fact, we are connected to the world or reality, right? Only through language. So that's why in the beginning, you remember I said there is an interconnection between thought, language, and reality. We cannot think of the world or reality without the language, and vice versa. That's why we say language reflects the reality. What is available in language is represented in reality, and what is available in reality, reality here I mean world. What is available in the world is reflected in my language. So that there is what is called the isomorphic relation between these two. So this is my answer to your first question. And second one, the phenomenology of language. See, the phenomenology of language, here one can say it is available in the ancient, medieval, modern, terminology everywhere. So it all depends on how you apply language. You remember I said in phenomenology of language, one of the important aspects is that understanding. So in ancient language also, this role of understanding has been exhibited properly. That's why I remember I said in my beginning of the talk, Plato's Cratylus. Here you see the significance of language. But what is important is that in ancient, modern or medieval period, language is one of the areas of their interest. Philosophers were discussing many issues and language is one of them. But in the linguistic turn or in the 20th century, discussing language or examining language or analyzing language has become the major work of the philosophers. This is my second answer. And third is, you said, what is the relation between language and mind? I can conceive the idea of something through mind. But whatever I conceive in my mind has to be expressed by language. That's why this also I said in the beginning, a thought which is not expressed in language is not a thought at all. So which means language must represent my thought or your thought or our thought. So there is a relation between mind and language. This is my answer to your third question.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, Professor, sir.
Thank you, Srinivas, Dr. Srinivas.
Now I invite Dr. Gloria V. Das, Assistant Professor and Head, Department of Christian Tamil Studies, Madurai Kamaraj University, Madurai. She is going to give vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. We take to the last part of the program. Vote of thanks. Honorable Vice-Chancellor, respected Registrar Madam, and all other learned professors and dear participants, a very good afternoon to all. It gives me an immense pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks for this event to all dignitaries assembled here. First, I would like to thank ICPR providing financial support for this wonderful program. And I thank our Vice-Chancellor, sincere and devoted Vice-Chancellor, who honored the function with inspirational thought through his presidential address. It is my privilege to thank Professor Lakshmi Aiyar, Professor, Rajasthan University, Madam, for your felicitating words are encouraging and your able guidance has always encouraged us. I thank you, your kindness, your interest, your hospitality and continued support, Madam. Thank you very much. I wish also to record our sincere appreciation and thanks to Dr. Lourdunathan for presenting a thought-provoking keynote address. Dr. Lourdunathan is very close to our department and our school. He is a very good philosopher, well-known professor in South India. Thank you very much, sir. I sincerely thank Dr. Felicitation, Professor of Philosophy, University of Nagar. He is a resource of inspiration and motivation among the students, making of his vast knowledge and make the seminar success. So thank you very much, sir. I would like to thank our distinguished speaker, Dr. Mishra, Professor of Philosophy, University of Madras, for making excellent presentation and making the seminar interesting and meaningful. Thank you very much, sir. I would also like to thank our beloved Madam, Dr. Srikala. Madam, your knowledge is very good, Madam. We enjoy your presentation. Our gratitude to exposing your speech. We are all inspired by your great work. Your presentation was very nice and more informative, Madam. Thank you very much. I am happy to express my thanks to our best friend and well-wisher Dr. Ramakrishnan sir, Chairperson, School of Social Sciences, for giving excellent courage to talk on value within Indian Constitution. We came to know the deep meaning and explanations about Indian Constitution, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Our special thanks goes to Dr. Dipesh for his continuous support for technical staff and all other sectors who are well-wishers to our department, sir. Thank you very much, Dr. Dipesh. Thank you very much. Finally, I thank Dr. Ravikumar, Organizing Secretary of this program, Secretary, Department of Science and Philosophy, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much, sir. I thank all the distinguished invitees present here for accepting our invitation. Finally, I leave you this inspiring quote by Martin Luther King: "As individuals does not started living until he rises above the consensus of his individualistic concern to the broader concern of all humanity." Thank you, one and all. Thank special thanks goes to Dr. Srinivasan, Dr. Nagarajan, and one and all. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, madam. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, professors.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.